In 3 minutes, everything will change. That's what I told myself as I smoothed my black designer dress and adjusted the emerald necklace that Michael had given me last Christmas. 15 years of marriage culminating in this moment, our crystal anniversary dinner at Harborview Restaurant. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The waterfront view of Portland sparkled through floor to ceiling. Windows, almost as brightly as the diamond bracelet on Amanda Collins's wrist. The same bracelet I'd seen charged to our joint business account last month. I wasn't supposed to be early. I was always running late. Reliable, predictable Jennifer Howard, perpetually apologizing for keeping people waiting while juggling children and a growing company. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was 20 minutes early, sitting alone, at our reserved table, watching my husband and his executive assistant arrive together, her hand resting comfortably on his arm before they spotted me. The look on Michael's face, pure, unfiltered shock followed by panic, was worth the 12 months of silent investigation, the countless nights analyzing financial records, the strategic business moves he never noticed because he was too busy building a life with someone else. "Jen, you're early," he stammered, quickly putting professional distance between himself and Amanda. But it was too late. I'd already watched them exchange a kiss in the parking lot through the restaurant's windows. I'd already intercepted his text to her, earlier. "After dinner with Jen, we'll celebrate our own anniversary. 1 year of us." "I thought we could all have dinner together," I said calmly, gesturing to the empty seats, "since Amanda is apparently such an important part of our lives." The look they exchanged would have broken me a year ago. Today, it merely confirmed what my forensic accountant had already proven. Over $300,000 of our shared assets diverted to designer gifts, weekend getaways, and a down payment on a condo I wasn't supposed to know about. "I don't understand," Michael attempted, his confident facade cracking. "Amanda was just dropping off some documents." I cut him off by sliding a folder across the table. "Like these documents? The incorporation papers for your side business using my company's proprietary designs? Or perhaps the lease agreement for the Lake Oswego condo? I'm particularly interested in discussing the joint bank account you opened last month." Amanda's perfectly lined lips parted in surprise before morphing into something harder. "Michael," she hissed, "you said you'd handled everything." "He did handle everything," I replied, opening my laptop. "Just not as cleverly as he thought." Let me take you back to where it began, not with dramatic revelations, but with something far more insidious: doubt. 2 years ago, Evergreen Innovations, my sustainable product design firm, landed its first major corporate contract. After 7 years of struggle, second mortgages, and countless 80-hour weeks, we'd finally broken through. Michael had been supportive, in his way, letting me use our garage as the first office space, watching the kids when I had late meetings, celebrating the small victories with champagne he selected. He'd built a respectable career in investment banking while I chased what he called my creative outlet. "You've got a good hobby here, Jen," he'd said during year 3, examining our modest profit margins. "But let's be realistic about its potential." That hobby now had 37 employees, a downtown Portland office, and a revolutionary water filtration design that major corporations were competing to license. The morning after we signed the contract with Green Path Industries, I woke up early, too excited to sleep. Michael's side of the bed was empty, as was becoming common. Finding him hunched over his laptop in our home office wasn't unusual. Him slamming it shut when I entered was. "Working early?" I asked, setting down coffee for him, a small gesture from our early days that I still maintained despite our increasingly parallel lives. "Just catching up on some things before the Thompson meeting," he said, accepting the coffee without meeting my eyes. "Congratulations again on the contract." We should celebrate properly this weekend. I nodded, ignoring the unfamiliar cologne, scent that didn't match the bottle in our bathroom, pushing aside the doubt that flickered like a warning light. We'd built a life together. Our beautiful West Hills home with its view of Matt Hood. Our teenagers Tyler and Sophia with their academic achievements and sports trophies. The vacation cabin on the Oregon coast where we'd spent every summer creating memories. Michael had supported my dream in his way. I could overlook small inconsistencies. But as evergreen innovations grew, those inconsistencies multiplied. The Thompson meeting became weekly late nights. The weekend celebrations were increasingly postponed. And Michael's interest in my company's finances grew strangely specific. "Who handles your intellectual property filings?" he asked over a rare dinner together. "You should consider additional protections for that filtration design." I explained our arrangement with a local law firm while noting how his eyes lingered. On his phone, fingers tapping out responses to messages I couldn't see. "And your software developers? They're all in-house? No outsourcing?" Another dinner, another line of questioning that felt less like interest and more like inventory. Tyler noticed it first. Our perceptive 17-year-old, so like me in his attention to detail, mentioned it as we drove to his debate tournament. "Dad's never around anymore," he observed, staring out the window. "And when he is, he's not really there, you know?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "He's got a big project at the bank. Things will settle down." Tyler's skeptical glance felt too adult for his teenage face. "Mom, when's the last time Dad asked about Evergreen? Like, really asked, not just that automatic, 'how was work' thing?" The question lingered uncomfortably. When had Michael stopped, listening to my stories about design challenges and employee successes? When had his perfunctory, "That's great, honey," replaced genuine interest? And why hadn't I noticed its absence until my son pointed it out? The first concrete evidence came, disguised as a banking error. While reviewing Evergreen's quarterly financials, Rachel, my executive assistant, flagged an unusual transfer. "Jen, did you authorize a consultation fee to Northwest Analytical?" she asked, placing the statement on my desk. "It's not in our vendor system, and I don't remember any contract." I stared at the $2,500 charge. The company name was vaguely familiar, but we certainly hadn't engaged them. Must be a mistake. I'll look into it. That evening, I mentioned it casually to Michael, over dinner, noting how he paused mid-bite before recovering. "Banking errors happen all the time," he said dismissively. "Just dispute the charge." I did dispute it, but also researched Northwest Analytical. The company had been incorporated just 6 months earlier, with a business address that matched a luxury condo building downtown. Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. I needed more information before jumping to conclusions. The next red flag appeared during Sophia's 15th birthday celebration. Michael received a call that pulled him away from the backyard party. Nothing unusual there. His clients often had financial emergencies. But when I brought a plate of cake to his office, intending to include him despite the interruption, I overheard his conversation. "The patent search is clean. Yes, we can move forward with the prototype. No, there's no risk of overlap. Trust me, I've verified everything personally." He ended the call abruptly when I entered, taking the cake with a distracted thanks before turning back to his computer. Patent searches weren't part of investment banking, and Michael had never shown interest in prototype development. Unless... I returned to the party, smiling for photos and singing "Happy Birthday" while my mind raced. That night, after the house, quieted, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I searched Michael's desk. Most drawers contained what I expected: bank statements, insurance policies, our children's school records. But the locked bottom drawer, which yielded to a letter opener with surprising ease, contained something else entirely. Preliminary designs for a water filtration system remarkably similar to Evergreen's proprietary technology. My technology. The innovation I'd developed over 3 years of testing and refinement. The design that had finally put Evergreen on the map. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional. Michael hadn't simply grown distant or uninterested. He was actively undermining the company I'd built. But why? And with whom? The answer came wrapped in designer perfume and Louboutin heels. Amanda Collins, the polished executive assistant Michael had hired 8 months ago. The woman he'd insisted on interviewing personally, overriding his firm's HR department. The same woman who now appeared in expense reports for business dinners that stretched late into the evening and weekend conferences in Seattle and Vancouver. I discovered their connection through social media, where Amanda had carelessly tagged locations that matched Michael's supposed business trips. A rooftop bar in Seattle when he claimed to be at a banking conference. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A beachfront restaurant in Cannon Beach the weekend, he told us he needed to catch up on quarterly reports. Each discovery should have devastated me. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. For the first time in years, the inconsistencies made sense. Michael's sudden interest in my company's intellectual property, the mysterious consultation fees, the late nights and weekend absences, the emotional distance that had grown so gradually. I'd hardly noticed its expansion. I had two choices: confront him immediately with incomplete evidence and risk losing everything, or gather information methodically until I understood the full scope of his betrayal. I chose the latter. "Diane, I need your absolute discretion," I told my best friend and business partner the following day, closing my office door. Diane Reynolds had been with me since Evergreen was just 2 desks in my garage. She knew the company's value better than anyone, and she knew my marriage almost as well. Her expression shifted from curious to concerned as I laid out what I'd discovered. "That absolute bastard," she whispered when I finished. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to protect what I've built," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. "But I need to understand exactly what I'm facing." Together, we crafted a plan. While continuing to run Evergreen with outward normalcy, I would quietly investigate Michael's activities, document everything, and prepare for all possible outcomes. Diane would help divert attention from my information gathering, creating plausible reasons for the questions I needed to ask. "We should bring in William," she suggested. William Chen had been Evergreen's attorney since our first patent application. If there's potential intellectual property theft, we need legal protection. Immediately, I hesitated. Involving William meant acknowledging that my marriage might be beyond saving, that Michael's betrayal might require legal remedy rather than emotional reconciliation. But Diane was right. This wasn't just about Michael and me anymore. It was about the company I'd built, the employees who depended on it, and the future I'd worked so hard to create. William's response was measured but decisive. "First, we secure your intellectual property with additional legal protections," he advised during our confidential meeting. "Second, we monitor for any attempts to use or market similar technology. Third, we document everything. Every suspicious transaction, every unusual question, every inconsistency in Michael's behavior." "And if I find concrete evidence of theft?" I asked. William's expression was professionally neutral. "Then we discuss options for both corporate and personal protection." Over the next several months, I became a detective in my own life. I maintained our normal routines: family dinners when Michael was home, parent-teacher conferences for the kids, occasional social events with other couples. But beneath this normalcy, I was meticulously building a case. I hired a forensic accountant who discovered the shell company, Northwest Analytical, was just one of 3 entities Michael had created. Together, they'd received over $300,000 from our personal accounts and Evergreen's business operations through carefully disguised transactions. Money that had funded prototype development, patent applications, and living expenses for a life I wasn't part of. The technology theft became clearer through patent filings I discovered under one of Michael's shell companies. They hadn't simply copied Evergreen's designs. They'd made strategic modifications to avoid direct infringement while still capitalizing on our core innovation. It was clever, calculated, and absolutely deliberate. Most painful was the personal deception. Michael had created a narrative about me within his new relationship. The disinterested wife, too consumed with her hobby business to notice her husband's needs. The distracted mother who prioritized work over family. The convenient excuse for his infidelity and betrayal. I found evidence of this narrative in emails obtained through digital forensics. Messages where Michael painted himself as supportive but neglected, financially generous but emotionally starved. In one particularly revealing exchange with Amanda, he wrote, "Jen's too busy chasing corporate contracts to notice what's happening right under her nose. The irony is, she'll probably thank me for taking this financial burden off her hands once everything's settled." The financial burden was my company, the innovation I'd dedicated my life to building. In Michael's alternate reality, he was rescuing my intellectual property from my own incompetence, redirecting it toward more profitable channels where he and Amanda could benefit from my years of work. As the evidence mounted, so did my strategic planning. William helped me secure additional patents and trademarks to protect Evergreen's intellectual assets. The forensic accountant created a detailed map of Michael's financial maneuvers, identifying vulnerabilities in his scheme. And Diane worked with me to establish contingency plans for Evergreen, ensuring the company could weather whatever storm might come. Through it all, I maintained a careful facade. I asked Michael casual questions about his work, accepted his transparent excuses for absences, and pretended not to notice when he took calls in another room. I needed him complacent, needed him confident that his deception was succeeding. The children were another matter. Tyler's initial observation had evolved into obvious concern. He'd stopped bringing friends home, as if embarrassed by the palpable tension. Sophia retreated into academics and her phone, avoiding family interactions whenever possible. I couldn't tell them the truth, not yet, but I couldn't let them believe they were responsible for the fracturing household either. "Your dad and I are going through some things," I acknowledged during a rare moment when Michael was working late and both kids were home. "But none of it is your fault, and we both love you more than anything." Tyler's skeptical expression matched his tone. "Is that why he missed my debate finals? Because he loves me so much?" "He's dealing with work pressures," I replied automatically, the excuse worn thin from repetition. "He doesn't miss Amanda's birthday parties," Sophia muttered, scrolling through her phone. At my startled look, she elaborated, "It's all over her Instagram. Dad's there in the background of like half her posts from last month." Ice flooded my veins. "Show me." Sophia pulled up several photos, social gatherings where Michael lurked in the background, business events where they stood suspiciously, clothes, restaurant check-ins that matched nights he'd claimed to be working late. Nothing explicitly incriminating, but the pattern was unmistakable to anyone looking for it. "Does everyone know?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Sophia shrugged with teenage-affected indifference that couldn't quite mask her hurt. "Katie, Morgan's mom asked me about it at soccer practice. Said it was such a shame with fake sympathy voice." The humiliation burned, not just for me, but for my children, forced to navigate social fallout from their father's choices. The careful investigation I'd been conducting suddenly felt too slow, too methodical. I wanted to confront Michael immediately, to end the charade that was causing my children pain. But William's voice echoed in my mind. Emotional reactions rarely yield optimal outcomes. Strategic patience almost always does. I reminded myself that this wasn't just about exposing a cheating husband. It was about protecting a business, securing intellectual property, and ensuring financial stability for myself and my children. I needed to follow the plan. "I'm handling it," I told my children, drawing them into a tight hug. "I promise I'm handling everything." The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. Catherine Grant, wife of Michael's business partner Thomas, cornered me at a charity auction with wine-loosened inhibitions and misplaced compassion. "Jennifer, I've wanted to say something for months," she began, her expensive perfume not quite masking the scent of Chardonnay. "Thomas thinks I should stay out of it, but if it were me, I'd want to know." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. "Know what, Catherine?" "About Michael and that assistant," she whispered, glancing around the crowded ballroom. "The condo in Lake Oswego. The business they're starting together. It's not right what he's doing to you." I took a deliberate sip of my sparkling water. "I appreciate your concern, Catherine. Truly." She blinked, confused by my calm response. "You're not upset?" "Information is never the enemy," I replied. "What people do with it determines its value." Catherine retreated in confusion, no doubt expecting tears or confrontation. Instead, she'd given me the final piece I needed: external confirmation of the Lake Oswego condo I'd already discovered through financial records. A property purchased through one of Michael's shell companies, furnished with items charged to our joint credit card, and apparently common knowledge among his business associates. That night, I compiled everything I'd gathered over months of investigation. Financial records showing the diverted funds, patent applications that mirrored Evergreen's technology, emails discussing plans to launch a competing company, social media evidence of the ongoing relationship, and statements from people like Catherine who could testify to what they'd witnessed. The folder was comprehensive, methodical, and damning. All that remained was to determine the time and place for its revelation. Our crystal anniversary provided the perfect opportunity. 15 years of marriage traditionally celebrated with crystal, clear, fragile, and easily shattered. Michael had suggested the Harborview Restaurant weeks earlier, seemingly forgetting that he'd taken Amanda to the same location for her birthday celebration, documented in her Instagram posts that Sophia had shown me. "The most important milestone yet," he'd called it, in a rare moment of attentiveness. "We should celebrate properly." I agreed with more enthusiasm than I'd shown in months, watching as relief flooded his features. He believed I remained oblivious, that his performance of the devoted husband for one evening would reset any doubts I might harbor. His confidence made him careless, scheduling dinner with Amanda immediately after our celebration, coordinating their stories through texts he no longer bothered to hide, believing I would never arrive early because I never had before. Which brings us back to that crystal anniversary dinner, with Michael standing frozen beside his mistress, staring at the folder I'd placed before him, and Amanda Collins hissing accusations about promises unkept. "I don't understand," he repeated, desperation creeping into his voice. "This was supposed to be our anniversary dinner." "It still is," I replied calmly. "Just not the celebration you expected." I could have confronted Michael immediately, thrown accusations and evidence in a public meltdown that would have satisfied some primitive need for emotional catharsis. But vengeance wasn't my goal. Protection was. "Please sit down," I told them both, gesturing to the chairs across from me. "The reservation's for 3. I took the liberty of adjusting it this morning." Amanda started to back away. "I should go. This is between you two." "Actually, it's between the 3 of us," I corrected her, opening my laptop. "Since you're an integral part of Northwest Analytical, Clearwater Solutions, and Portland Environmental Technologies, all companies built with my intellectual property and funded with my company's resources." The color drained from Michael's face as I turned the screen toward them, displaying a flowchart of their corporate structure created by the forensic accountant. Every shell company, every financial transaction, every connection meticulously documented. "That's not," Michael began, but Amanda cut him off. Lawyer, she snapped at him. We need to call James right now. I nodded appreciatively. Good. Instinct, Amanda. Legal counsel would be appropriate given the circumstances. I've already consulted mine. I slid business cards across the table. William Chen will be handling the intellectual property claims. Rebecca Matthews is managing the divorce proceedings. And the Portland Police Department has an open file regarding the financial fraud. The detective's contact information is there as well. Michael stared at the business cards as if they might explode. Police? Jen, you're overreacting. This is just a misunderstanding. A $300,000 misunderstanding? I interrupted, my voice still unnervingly calm. Or perhaps you're referring to the patent applications that mysteriously mirror Evergreen's proprietary technology. Maybe the misunderstanding. Is the condo lease listing both of you as occupants, paid for with our joint funds? Amanda's composure cracked first. You said she didn't know anything, she accused Michael. You promised me she was clueless. She was, he muttered, then caught himself. I mean, there's nothing to know. Jennifer, you're making connections. That don't exist. I turned to Amanda. He told you I was clueless? That I wouldn't notice hundreds of thousands of dollars missing or my own technology being stolen? I smiled without warmth. Did he mention I built a multi-million-dollar company? From nothing while raising our children? Does that sound like someone who doesn't pay attention to details? Doubt flickered across her face as she reassessed me. Gone was the distracted, frumpy wife Michael had described in their emails. Instead, she faced a woman who had methodically documented their every move while building contingency plans they hadn't imagined. Michael tried a different approach. Let's not discuss this here, he suggested, glancing nervously at nearby diners. We can talk privately, find a reasonable solution for everyone. Like the solution you planned for me? I asked mildly. I've read your emails discussing how to push me out of my own company, Michael. The ones where you explain to Amanda how my emotional attachment to Evergreen makes me vulnerable to manipulation. Your strategy was comprehensive, if ethically, bankrupt. A waiter approached with menus, sensing the tension but professionally ignoring it. Would you like to order drinks to start? I'll have sparkling water, I replied pleasantly. Nothing for us, Michael interjected. We won't be staying. I raised an eyebrow. That's unfortunate. I was hoping we could discuss the terms of my proposal over dinner. What proposal? Amanda asked sharply. The one that keeps you both out of court and potentially prison, I answered. Since you're so eager to be part of my business, I thought you might appreciate the opportunity to do so legally. That caught their attention. Michael leaned forward, desperation battling with calculation in his expression. What exactly are you suggesting? I outlined my terms with the precision I'd use to build Evergreen. Full financial restitution of all diverted funds, signed agreements transferring any competing patents or technologies back to my company, Michael's resignation from Northwest, financial to eliminate ongoing conflicts of interest, and a divorce settlement that acknowledged his attempted theft. In exchange, I concluded, I won't press charges for intellectual property theft or financial fraud. You'll retain your professional reputation, if not your integrity. And you can continue whatever personal arrangement you've established without my involvement. Amanda studied me suspiciously. Why would you offer this instead of destroying him? You have enough evidence. Because revenge is inefficient, I replied truthfully. It consumes resources better invested elsewhere. I've built something valuable once. I won't waste time destroying what doesn't matter when I could be building something even better. Michael's relief was palpable and premature. We can make this work, he said eagerly. I'll transfer everything back, the money, the patents, all of it. I haven't finished, I interrupted. There's one more condition. They waited expectantly. You both attend a family meeting tonight where we tell Tyler and Sophia the truth. Not some sanitized version where nobody's at fault, but the reality of what's happened. They deserve honesty after months of watching their family disintegrate, without explanation. Michael's face contorted. That's unreasonable. The kids don't need to know details that would only hurt them. They already know more than you realize, I told him. They've been collateral damage in your deception. The whispers at school, the questions from friends, the Instagram posts. Sophia found months ago. They've been piecing it together without our help, creating explanations that probably assign them blame they don't deserve. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. That should be between you two. I don't need to be there for a family discussion. You became part of this family's story the moment you participated in stealing from it, I replied evenly. Your presence isn't a request. It's a requirement of the agreement. Michael tried once more. Jen, be reasonable. What purpose does public humiliation serve? It's not public, it's private, within the family you've wounded, and it serves the purpose of truth, which is the foundation of everything else we'll build moving forward. I closed my laptop deliberately. Those are my terms. Accept them tonight, or I file everything with the district attorney tomorrow morning. The ultimatum hung between us, crystal clear and non-negotiable. Michael glanced at Amanda, who gave an imperceptible nod of resignation. Fine, he conceded. We'll do it your way. I signaled for the waiter. I'll have the check, please. It seems we won't be dining after all. As we gathered our things in tense silence, Michael attempted one final manipulation. I did love you, Jen. Maybe if you'd been more present in our marriage, things would have been different. I met his gaze directly. I was building a life while you were plotting to steal it. Don't confuse my focus for absence. Driving home separately, I called Diane to implement the next phase of our plan. It's happening tonight, I told her. Have William ready with the paperwork first thing tomorrow. Are you okay? She asked. Concern evident even through the car's speakers. I considered the question seriously. I'm something better than okay, I finally answered. I'm clear. Tyler and Sophia were waiting in the living room when I arrived home. Their expressions, mixture of confusion and apprehension. I'd texted them earlier, asking them to be home by 8 without explanation. What's going on? Tyler asked immediately. Are you and Dad getting divorced? The directness of his question confirmed what I'd suspected. They'd been preparing themselves for this moment for months. Your father will be here shortly, I told them. With Amanda. We're going to have an honest conversation about what's been happening and what comes next. Sophia's eyes widened. Amanda's coming here? His assistant? Yes, I replied simply. And once they arrive, all your questions will be answered. The 30 minutes we waited were among the longest of my life. I resisted the urge to preemptively explain or make excuses for what they were about to learn. They deserved the unvarnished truth, not a carefully curated version designed to protect their father's image. When Michael's car pulled into the driveway, followed by Amanda's sleek BMW, Sophia gripped my hand tightly. Whatever happens, I'm on your side, she whispered fiercely. The family meeting that followed was painful but necessary. Michael attempted to minimize his actions, portraying his relationship with Amanda as an unfortunate emotional entanglement, rather than the calculated betrayal it was. I calmly corrected each misrepresentation with documented evidence, watching, as my children's understanding of their father transformed before my eyes. Tyler's question cut through one of Michael's explanations. Did you steal from Mom's company? The direct inquiry from his son seemed to affect Michael more than anything. I'd presented at the restaurant. He stammered through a response about leveraging underutilized intellectual property and creating synergistic opportunities. That's a yes, Tyler translated flatly. Amanda remained largely silent, her discomfort evident as she witnessed the family consequences of their actions. When Sophia asked her directly, "Did you know he was married with kids when this started?" Amanda's affirmative response eliminated any potential sympathy. By evening's end, several truths had been established. Michael and I would divorce, he would comply with all my legal and financial terms, the children would remain primarily with me but have appropriate access to their father, and Amanda would honor my intellectual property rights moving forward. As they prepared to leave, Michael made one final attempt to salvage his image. "I know this is difficult to understand now," he told the children, "but sometimes adults grow apart." "It doesn't mean I don't love you both," Tyler responded with a clarity beyond his 17 years. "Growing apart is something that happens. Stealing Mom's business and lying about it for months was something you chose." After they left, the three of us, myself and the two remarkable human beings I'd raised, sat in our living room in stunned silence. Finally, Sophia asked the question that mattered most. "What happens to us now? To Evergreen? To everything?" I told them the truth. We rebuild. We take what's valuable, our relationship, the company, the life we've created here, and we strengthen it. And we let go of what doesn't serve us anymore. Like Dad? Tyler's question carried more pain than his matter-of-fact tone suggested. "Your relationship with your father is yours to determine," I told him carefully. "My relationship with him has changed permanently." Those are different things, and you don't have to reconcile them. Over the coming weeks, Michael complied with each requirement of our agreement. The financial restitution, while substantial, didn't erase the betrayal, but it did provide resources for Evergreen's continued growth. The intellectual property returned to its rightful ownership, securing our competitive advantage. And the divorce proceedings, while emotionally taxing, progressed without the acrimony that might have consumed us had I chosen vengeance over strategy. Amanda disappeared from our immediate concerns, though I later learned she'd relocated to Seattle, presumably to distance herself from the consequences of their failed scheme. Michael moved into a downtown apartment, his executive position at Northwest Financial, compromised not by my disclosure, but by his own actions once his colleagues understood what he'd attempted. Throughout this period, I maintained Evergreen's operations with a focus that surprised even me. The company had been my creation, my purpose beyond family life, and now it became my sanctuary as well. Each strategic decision, each product innovation, each successful client acquisition reinforced what Michael had failed to understand. I hadn't been distracted by my company, I had been fulfilled by it. 6 months after the crystal anniversary, dinner that shattered our marriage, Evergreen Innovations secured its largest contract yet, a national distribution agreement that would triple our annual revenue. The executive team gathered in our conference room to celebrate, champagne flowing as we toasted the achievement. "To Jennifer Howard," Diane announced, raising her glass, "who built something extraordinary while facing extraordinary challenges." The applause from my colleagues, people who had witnessed my professional journey without knowing all the personal details, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Not from sadness or lingering hurt, but from the profound realization that I had never been the woman Michael described in those damning emails. I hadn't been distracted or incompetent or blind. I had been focused, capable, and strategic. Qualities that served me in business and, ultimately, in protecting myself from betrayal. Later that evening, as I sat on my back deck watching the sunset paint Mount Hood in brilliant oranges and pinks, Tyler joined me with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Mom," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "I've been thinking about changing my college plans." I turned to him with curiosity. He'd been set on attending his father's alma mater since childhood, a path Michael had encouraged with stories of fraternity adventures and business connections. "Instead of business school," he continued, "I'm considering environmental engineering, with a focus on water systems." The significance wasn't lost on me. "Because of Evergreen?" He nodded. watching you build something that actually helps people, that solves real problems. It made me realize I want to create solutions, not just manage money. I hugged him fiercely, recognizing the gift hidden within the painful months we'd endured. My children had witnessed not just the betrayal of trust, but also the power of purpose. They'd seen what it meant to build rather than take, to create rather than scheme. As Tyler returned inside, my phone chimed with a notification. A text from Michael, our communication now limited to practical matters regarding the children or final divorce details. Heard about the distribution contract. Congratulations! You've always been capable of more than I gave you credit for. I considered responding, but ultimately set the phone aside without replying. His acknowledgement, while accurate, wasn't necessary for my journey forward. I didn't need external validation of what I already knew to be true. The empire I'd built, both. The company that bore my creative imprint and the family that carried my values, had never been defined by Michael's perception of it. And its future would be determined by my vision, not his limitations. The sky darkened to deep blue as I finished my lemonade, making mental notes for tomorrow's executive meeting. We had a company to grow, innovations to develop, and a future to build. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that future felt limitless. The family meeting left a silence in our home that persisted for days. Tyler retreated to his room, emerging only for meals and school. Sophia oscillated between fierce protectiveness toward me and inconsolable grief over the family she thought we'd been. I moved through our house like a ghost, touching photographs that suddenly felt like artifacts from a museum exhibit about someone else's life. But beneath that silence, I was working. We need to move quickly, William advised during our morning conference call. Michael's compliance now doesn't guarantee cooperation later. The paperwork should be filed immediately. Diane nodded from her side of the video chat. I've already implemented the intellectual property safeguards. Our systems have been completely segregated from any access points Michael might have used. I rubbed my temples, fighting the headache that had become my constant companion. What about the licensing agreements that might be compromised? The ones where Michael had input on the contract language. William's expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the flicker of concern. We're reviewing all documents he might have influenced. So far, we've identified 3 agreements with potentially problematic clauses, subtle language that could be exploited with the right leverage. By Amanda, I supplied, connecting the dots. Her background is in contract law. She would know exactly how to insert ambiguous language that could be weaponized later. Precisely, William confirmed. We're drafting amendments to close those loopholes, approaching each client with legitimate business reasons for the updates. No need to reveal the personal complications. Personal complications, such a sanitized phrase for the implosion of my marriage and the attempted theft of my life's work. I almost laughed at the corporate euphemism, but exhaustion won out. What about the financial recovery? I asked instead. Diane referenced her notes. The forensic accountant has traced most of the diverted funds. Michael has returned approximately 60% so far, with a signed agreement for the remainder. We've implemented additional financial controls to prevent any similar vulnerabilities in the future. I nodded, making my own notes in the leather-bound planner that had become my lifeline. Organization had always been my strength, but now it felt like the only thing keeping me from drowning in the chaos Michael had created. And the children? William asked gently, shifting from corporate counsel to family friend. The question hit harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on securing Evergreen's future that I hadn't fully processed how Tyler and Sophia were coping beyond their initial reactions. I hesitated, searching for the right word. Processing. Tyler has always been quieter, more internal. Sophia wears everything on her sleeve, but they're both wounded in ways I'm not sure how to address. Diane's expression softened. Have you considered family therapy? Not with Michael, just for the three of you? I hadn't, too caught up in the immediate priorities of legal protection and business continuity. But Diane's suggestion resonated. We needed professional guidance to navigate this new landscape. I'll look into it, I promised, making another note. After ending the call, I sat alone in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of Michael's betrayal, financial documents, legal agreements, security reports, all neatly organized in color-coded folders. The methodical documentation that had saved my company now felt like an anchor dragging me into darker emotional waters. I needed air. Grabbing my keys, I drove without destination, eventually finding myself at Forest Park. The familiar trails had been our family's weekend ritual during the early years, before Michael's banking career demanded weekend networking and the children's activities filled our schedules. I hadn't visited in months, maybe years. The damp Pacific Northwest air filled my lungs as I walked, fallen leaves cushioning each step. The physical movement loosened something tight in my chest, creating space for thoughts I'd been suppressing beneath tactical planning. I was angry, not just at Michael's betrayal, but at myself for not recognizing it sooner. The signs had been there, his diminishing interest in my company except for specific technical aspects, his defensiveness when questioned about late nights, his subtle criticisms that gradually eroded my confidence. I'd attributed these changes to normal marital evolution, to the stresses of raising teenagers and managing dual careers. But that rationalization crumbled beneath the weight of evidence. Michael hadn't grown distant because of external pressures. He'd created distance deliberately to facilitate his deception. Each late-night client meeting had been carefully planned, each business trip meticulously orchestrated. The emotional withdrawal hadn't been an unfortunate side effect of a busy life, it had been strategic. Rain began falling, gentle at first, then heavier, matching the tears I finally allowed myself. Alone on the forest trail, I surrendered to grief. Not just for my marriage, but for the years spent trusting someone who had calculated his betrayal with the same precision I used to design Evergreen's innovative products. I cried until physical. Exhaustion matched my emotional state, then found a sheltered bench and sat, watching raindrops create concentric circles and puddles. The mathematical precision was oddly comforting. Cause and effect, action and reaction, predictable patterns in natural chaos. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Where are you? Tyler and I are worried." I hadn't realized how much time had passed. "Forest Park," I replied. "Needed some air, heading home soon." "Wait," she texted back immediately. "We'll come to you, Tyler's driving." 20 minutes later, my children found me still sitting on the rain-soaked bench. Without words, they settled beside me, Sophia linking her arm through mine while Tyler offered a thermos of hot coffee he'd brought. "We used to come here all the time," Sophia observed, looking around at the mist-shrouded trees. "Remember when Tyler got poison oak because Dad said that vine was definitely safe to touch?" A small laugh escaped me at the memory. "He scratched for weeks." "Worth it," Tyler said with the hint of a smile. "Dad had to take me for ice cream every day as an apology." The mention of Michael created a momentary tension that Sophia broke with her characteristic directness. "We've been talking," she began, glancing at her brother for confirmation. "About everything, about what happens next." I braced myself, uncertain what conclusions they'd reached. "And?" "We want to stay with you," Tyler stated firmly. "Full time. We'll visit Dad because we should, but home is with you." Relief flooded me. I'd been prepared to honor whatever arrangement they preferred, even if it meant equal time with Michael. But their choice eased an anxiety I hadn't fully acknowledged. "We also think you should keep the house," Sophia added. "He doesn't deserve it after what he did." "These decisions aren't yours to make," I reminded them gently. "The legal process will determine—" "Mom," Tyler interrupted, uncharacteristically assertive. We're not kids anymore. We're old enough to have opinions about where we live and who we trust. The maturity in his voice struck me. When had my cautious, quiet son developed such clarity? Perhaps the same crucible that was breaking me down was forging something stronger in my children. Diane sent us pamphlets about a family therapist, Sophia admitted. We already called and made an appointment for next week, all three of us. I stared at her in surprise. You did what? We figured you were handling everything else, Tyler explained with a shrug. So we could handle this part? My children's initiative both humbled and heartened me. While I'd been focusing on securing our financial and legal future, they'd been addressing our emotional one. They weren't passive victims of Michael's betrayal. They were active participants in our family's recovery. Well, I said, fighting a fresh wave of tears, thank you for taking that initiative. Sophia squeezed my arm. We got your back, Mom, always. We sat together as the rain eased. Three people at the beginning of a journey none of us had chosen, but all were determined to navigate with grace. The path forward remained uncertain, but for the first time since discovering Michael's betrayal, I felt something approaching hope. That feeling carried me through the following weeks as our new reality took shape. The initial divorce filing proceeded without Michael's contestation, a small mercy given the overwhelming evidence I'd compiled. His legal compliance, however, didn't extend to emotional accountability. In conversations with the children, he continued minimizing his actions and subtly shifting blame. Your mother was always more committed to Evergreen than to our family, he told them during their first weekend visit to his new apartment. I made mistakes, but I felt lonely for years before Amanda. Sophia reported this comment during our second family therapy session with Dr. Elena Rivera, a compassionate woman with an uncanny ability to create safe spaces for difficult truths. And how did that make you feel? Dr. Rivera asked her. Sophia twisted her friendship bracelet, a nervous habit since childhood. Angry and confused. Because Mom worked a lot, but she never missed my dance recitals or Tyler's debates. She was always there for the important stuff. Yeah, Tyler agreed. Dad's the one who started skipping things. Remember when he couldn't come to my science fair because of a client emergency? Now I wonder if that was even true. The therapist turned to me. Jennifer, how do you feel hearing your children's observations? I considered my answer carefully, conscious of balancing honesty with appropriate boundaries. Validated, I admitted finally. And sad that they're questioning every excuse their father ever gave them. That's an unfair burden for them to carry. It's not a burden we're carrying because of you, Tyler clarified. It's because of what he did. Dr. Rivera nodded. That's an important distinction, Tyler. Acknowledging where responsibility truly lies is part of healthy processing. These sessions became our weekly anchor, a protected time when the three of us could express fears and frustrations without judgment. Dr. Rivera helped us develop communication tools for navigating our new family dynamics, emphasizing that relationships could be redefined rather than simply broken. Your family isn't ending, she reminded us. It's transforming. And transformation, while painful, can ultimately lead to something stronger than before. I wanted to believe her, especially on days when the weight of Michael's betrayal threatened to crush my rebuilt confidence. Those moments still ambushed me occasionally, finding his forgotten cufflink in a drawer, overhearing colleagues mention his name, driving past restaurants where we'd celebrated anniversaries. Each reminder triggered a cascade of doubt. How had I missed the signs? What could I have done differently? Was I partly responsible for the breakdown of our marriage? Dr. Rivera challenged these intrusive thoughts directly. You're applying retrospective knowledge to past situations, she explained. You couldn't have acted on information you didn't have. And more importantly, Michael's choices were his responsibility, not yours. Intellectually, I understood this reasoning. Emotionally, acceptance came more slowly, in fragmented moments, of clarity that gradually accumulated into a new perspective. One such moment occurred during a quarterly business review with Evergreen's leadership team. We were discussing the water filtration technology that Michael had attempted to steal, the innovation that had triggered his betrayal. "The patent applications are secure," our IP specialist confirmed, "but the real value isn't in the current design. It's in Jennifer's vision for its evolution." "Exactly," agreed our head of R&D. "The filtration system itself is impressive, but Jennifer's integration concept is what makes it revolutionary. That's something that couldn't be stolen because it exists primarily in her mind." Their observations highlighted a truth I hadn't fully appreciated. While Michael could duplicate documents and designs, he couldn't replicate the creative insight that generated them. He had attempted to steal the products of my imagination without understanding the imagination itself was the true asset. That realization liberating. My value wasn't contained in the intellectual property Michael coveted, but in the ongoing capacity to innovate that remained uniquely mine. He could take snapshots of my creation process, but not the process itself. This perspective shifted my approach to rebuilding. Instead of focusing solely on protecting what I'd already created, I redirected energy toward new innovations, the next generation of sustainable solutions that would establish Evergreen's market leadership for years to come. "I want to accelerate development on the commercial applications," I announced during our next executive meeting. "The residential market is secure, but there's untapped potential in municipal systems." Diane raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant pivot. The municipal sector has longer sales cycles and more regulatory hurdles." "And higher impact potential," I countered. "Our technology could provide clean water solutions for communities currently underserved by existing infrastructure. The social impact aligns with our mission, and the commercial opportunity is substantial." The team exchanged glances, likely wondering if this ambitious proposal represented genuine strategic thinking or a reaction to recent personal trauma. I couldn't blame their skepticism. I'd questioned my own decision-making capacity during the darkest days following Michael's betrayal. "I understand your concerns," I acknowledged. "And yes, my perspective has evolved recently. But not in the way you might fear. I've realized we've been thinking too conservatively, limiting our vision to what seemed immediately achievable. I'm proposing we think bigger, not from desperation, but from confidence in what we've already proven we can accomplish." Diane studied me for a long moment before breaking into a slow smile. "Well, I'll be damned. You're not running from something. You're running toward something." "Exactly," I confirmed, relief washing through me as my closest ally recognized the distinction. "Now who's with me?" The unanimous support from my leadership team reinforced what Dr. Rivera had been trying to help me see. Betrayal had wounded me, but not diminished me. If anything, removing Michael's subtle undermining had created space for more authentic confidence to emerge. This professional momentum paralleled progress in our personal lives. Tyler and Sophia settled into routines that accommodated our new reality without being defined by it. They maintained contact with Michael through scheduled visits and phone calls, establishing boundaries that protected their emotional well-being while preserving the relationship. "It's weird," Sophia confessed one evening as we prepared dinner together, another ritual that had evolved since the separation. "I'm still mad at Dad, but I don't want to hate him forever. Is that okay?" I paused in chopping vegetables, considering her question carefully. "Of course it's okay. Your relationship with your father is separate from my relationship with him. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened." She nodded, processing this nuance. Dr. Rivera said something similar, that forgiveness is really about freeing ourselves, not the other person. "She's very wise," I agreed, impressed by my daughter's emotional intelligence. At 15, Sophia was navigating complex emotional terrain with a maturity that humbled me. Tyler expressed his processing differently, channeling energy into academics and extracurriculars with intensified focus. His debate team advanced to state finals, his arguments sharpened by newfound understanding of human motivation and ethical complexities. Ms. Harrington, his debate coach told me during a competition, Tyler's performance this season has been remarkable. His arguments show a depth of perspective I rarely see in students his age. I watched my son methodically dismantle his opponents. Position on corporate ethical responsibility, his points structured with the same precision I applied to business strategies. He's had to grow up quickly this year, I replied, pride mingling with regret that circumstances had accelerated his maturation. Whatever the catalyst, the coach observed, he's channeling it constructively. That's a testament to his character, and yours. These external validations helped counter the lingering self-doubt that sometimes surfaced, particularly when facing Michael directly. Despite our agreement to communicate primarily through attorneys, certain situations, school events, medical, decisions for the children, occasionally required direct interaction. During Tyler's debate finals, we found ourselves seated in the same auditorium row, maintaining careful distance while presenting a united front of parental support. The tension between us remained palpable, charged with unspoken accusations and defenses. He's doing well, Michael observed during intermission, his attempt at normal conversation falling flat in the charged space between us. Yes, I agreed. He's remarkably resilient. Michael hesitated before adding, they both are. Like their mother. The compliment, if that's what it was, landed awkwardly. Too little, too late, and tainted by the knowledge that he'd once used my resilience against me, counting on it to sustain our family while he built a separate life with Amanda. Resilience shouldn't have been necessary, I replied quietly. They deserved stability. His expression tightened. I'm trying, Jennifer. I'm attending every therapy session the mediator recommended. I'm following all the court stipulations. What more do you want from me? The question ignited an anger I thought I'd processed. What do I want? I repeated, keeping my voice low despite the emotion surging through me. I wanted a husband who wouldn't steal from me while sleeping with his assistant. I wanted a father for my children who wouldn't use them as alibis for his affair. I wanted the partner I thought I married, not the manipulator you turned out to be. Michael's face flushed, his jaw clenching in the familiar way that once signaled impending argument. But instead of firing back, he exhaled slowly. I deserved that, he acknowledged. And more. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry, Jennifer. Not just for getting caught, but for the choices I made. The apology surprised me, not because it was particularly eloquent or comprehensive, but because it seemed genuine. In our 15 years together, Michael had rarely admitted fault without qualification. Even his initial responses to the evidence I'd gathered had been defensive rather than contrite. Why now? I asked, genuinely curious about the shift. He glanced toward the stage where Tyler would soon return to deliver his final argument. Therapy, partly, but mostly watching the kids navigate this mess I created. They're showing more integrity than I did, and it's illuminating. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed for the next round. We returned to our seats in silence, the conversation unfinished but somehow altered. Michael's acknowledgement didn't erase the harm he'd caused, but it suggested a capacity for growth I'd stopped believing he possessed. This glimpse of potential accountability complicated my emotional landscape. The clean narrative of villain and victim that had organized my understanding became more nuanced, requiring adjustments to my healing process. Dr. Rivera helped me navigate this complexity in our individual sessions, which complemented the family therapy. Acknowledging his regret doesn't obligate you to forgive prematurely, she reminded me. And recognizing his humanity doesn't minimize the impact of his actions. Then why does it feel confusing? I asked, frustrated by my own conflicted response. Part of me wants to hold on to the anger because it feels protective. Anger often serves that purpose during healing, she agreed. It creates emotional distance when boundaries have been violated. But eventually, most people find that sustained anger requires energy they'd rather invest elsewhere. Her perspective resonated, especially as Evergreen's expansion demanded increasing focus. The municipal water initiative I'd proposed had gained traction faster than anticipated, with 2 pilot projects approved and preliminary discussions, with international development organizations exploring applications in water-stressed regions. This growth necessitated organizational changes, including a reconfigured leadership structure and additional capital investment. I spent long hours with financial advisors evaluating options, conscious that decisions made now would shape Evergreen's trajectory for years. Private equity remains interested, our CFO reported during a strategy session, but they're pushing for aggressive expansion timelines that might compromise our sustainability values. What about strategic partnerships? I suggested. Companies already aligned with our mission who could provide capital without pressuring us to sacrifice core principles. This approach yielded promising conversations with GreenPath Industries, the corporation that had signed our first major contract 2 years earlier. Their CEO, Catherine Lin, shared my commitment to environmental impact alongside financial success. Your municipal water concept aligns perfectly with our infrastructure initiatives, she observed during our initial discussion. There's potential for significant synergy without either company compromising its identity. As negotiations progressed, I found myself energized by possibilities that hadn't existed before my personal crisis. The betrayal that could have destroyed both my marriage and company had instead created space for more authentic vision, personally and professionally. This realization crystallized during a quiet moment in my office, reviewing proposed partnership terms while rain drummed against the windows. 2 years ago, I would have consulted Michael before making decisions of this magnitude, seeking his financial expertise and validation. His absence from this process wasn't a liability. It was liberation from subtle undermining I hadn't fully recognized until it vanished. I remembered his dismissive assessment when Evergreen secured its first small commercial contract. Impressive for a side project, but don't get too excited. The big players won't take you seriously without significant capital behind you. At the time, I'd accepted his tempering of my enthusiasm as pragmatic wisdom from his banking experience. Now I recognized it as something else: limitation disguised as guidance, doubt masquerading as protection. Whether conscious or not, Michael had consistently framed my ambitions within boundaries he controlled, encouraging enough success to reflect well on him without threatening the dynamic where his career remained primary. The partnership proposal, before me, represented stepping beyond those artificial limitations. GreenPath's investment would fuel Evergreen's expansion while maintaining my controlling interest and decision-making authority. The municipal water initiative could scale globally, potentially transforming communities while establishing Evergreen as an industry leader in sustainable infrastructure. I signed the preliminary agreement with steady hands, no longer needing external validation to trust my business instincts. The confidence that had once been undermined by Michael's subtle criticisms had reconstituted itself, stronger for having been tested. This professional milestone coincided with a personal one: finalizing the divorce agreement. After months of negotiation through attorneys, Michael ultimately accepted terms that acknowledged his attempted appropriation of my intellectual property while allowing him to maintain professional dignity. "He's being surprisingly reasonable," William observed during our final review of the settlement documents. "I expected more resistance on the financial provisions." "I think he wants this chapter closed as much as I do," I replied, signing where indicated. And the evidence I gathered didn't leave much room for negotiation. With those signatures, 15 years of marriage ended officially, though the emotional conclusion had occurred months earlier. I expected to feel something momentous, grief or relief or both, but instead experienced a quiet sense of completion, like closing a book whose story had already reached its natural conclusion. That evening, I invited Diane to join the children and me for dinner, transforming the legal milestone into a small celebration of our collective resilience. We ordered from our favorite Thai restaurant, set the dining room table with the good dishes, and opened a bottle of champagne, with small glasses of sparkling cider for Tyler and Sophia. "To new chapters," Diane proposed, raising her glass. "And to the family that remained standing when the smoke cleared," Sophia lifted her cider. "And to Mom, who showed us what real strength looks like." Tyler, never comfortable with emotional declarations, added simply, "To moving forward." Their toast touched me deeply, acknowledging the pain we'd endured without allowing it to define our future. We had survived Michael's betrayal not just intact, but somehow expanded. More authentic in our connections, more intentional in our choices, more appreciative of the bonds that remained unbroken. Later, after Tyler and Sophia had retreated to their rooms and Diane had gone home, I sat alone on our back deck, watching stars emerge above Portland's city lights. The spring air carried the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden I'd started after the separation, a small act of reclamation, planting something new in soil that had lain dormant during my marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Lynn, partnership papers filed today. Looking forward to transforming the water infrastructure landscape together. Your vision is inspiring." I smiled at the affirmation that would once have seemed impossible. Not just the business achievement, but the recognition of my vision as a driving force rather than a creative outlet, as Michael had often characterized it. The journey from his betrayal to this moment hadn't been linear or simple, but its direction had been consistently upward. A notification from our home security system interrupted my reflection. A car approaching the driveway. The camera feed showed an unfamiliar vehicle stopping briefly before continuing past our house. Nothing concerning, but the momentary intrusion reminded me of lessons learned through trauma, the importance of boundaries, the value of vigilance, the necessity of protecting what matters most. I'd applied those lessons in rebuilding both my personal life and evergreen innovations. The company that had once been vulnerable to Michael's manipulation was now structurally reinforced against similar threats. The family that had nearly fractured under the weight of his betrayal had reconstituted itself with stronger bonds, and I had emerged with clearer vision about my own worth and capabilities. The evening's quiet was broken by Sophia's voice from the doorway. "Can't sleep?" she asked, wrapping herself in a blanket as she joined me on the deck. "Just thinking," I replied, making room for her on the outdoor sofa. "About how much has changed this year." She leaned against my shoulder, her warmth a tangible reminder of what remained constant despite everything that had shifted. "Good changes or bad ones?" I considered her question seriously. "Both, but mostly good ones, in the long run. We've all grown in ways we might not have otherwise." "That's what Dr. Rivera calls post-traumatic growth," Sophia observed. "When bad stuff happens, but you end up stronger because of it." I smiled at my daughter's casual wisdom. "Exactly, though I wouldn't have chosen this particular growth catalyst." "Me neither," she agreed. "But I like who we're becoming, especially you, Mom." "Me?" I turned to study her expression. "Yeah, you're different now, more confident or something, like you don't second-guess yourself the way you used to." Her perception startled me. I hadn't realized my internal recalibration was visible to others, especially my children. I didn't know it showed. "It totally shows," she assured me. "Tyler and I were talking about it yesterday. How you used to always check with Dad before making decisions, even though you were usually right in the first place. Now you just know what you want and go for it." Her observation captured precisely what had changed, not just circumstantially, but essentially. Michael's betrayal had forced me to trust my own judgment when his proved fatally flawed. That necessity had become liberation, revealing strengths that had always existed beneath layers of accommodation and compromise. "I'm still figuring it out," I admitted. "Some days are harder than others." That's okay, Sophia replied with the simple certainty of youth. We're all figuring it out together. We sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around us. Mother and daughter at the midpoint of a journey neither of us had chosen, but both were navigating with growing confidence. The path forward remained imperfect and occasionally uncertain, but unmistakably ours, shaped by our choices rather than Michael's betrayal. And in that moment, watching stars with my daughter while my son slept safely inside and my company expanded beyond previous imagination, I recognized the ultimate truth of this difficult chapter. Michael's greatest miscalculation hadn't been underestimating my business acumen or investigative persistence, but failing to understand that the empire he attempted to steal was never contained in patents or products. It existed in resilience, in creativity, in relationships built on authentic connection rather than manipulation, in the capacity to transform betrayal into growth and limitation into possibility. He had tried to appropriate what I'd built without, recognizing that the true power lay in the ability to build in the first place, an ability that remained uniquely mine, strengthened rather than diminished by the very challenges intended to defeat it. That realization wasn't just healing, it was transformative. The business empire I continued building would reflect this hard-won wisdom, not just in its structure and strategies, but in its fundamental purpose, creating solutions that expanded possibility rather than exploiting vulnerability. The personal life I was reconstructing would embody the same principles, with boundaries that protected without isolating and connections that supported without constraining. As Sophia eventually returned inside and I prepared to follow, I paused for one final moment under the stars, acknowledging both the pain and possibility of this pivotal year. The anniversary dinner that had revealed Michael's betrayal had indeed changed everything, just not in the way he and Amanda had planned. Their demand for half of what I'd built had catalyzed a reckoning that ultimately doubled its value. Not through vengeance or retribution, but through the clarity that comes from removing what no longer serves growth. Like pruning damages branches. To strengthen the whole tree, eliminating Michael's toxic influence had created space for more authentic flourishing, personally and professionally. That growth continued unfolding, its direction determined not by what had been lost, but by what remained uncompromised. My vision, my values, and my capacity to build something meaningful from whatever materials life provided. Even the broken pieces of betrayal. The Green Path partnership transformed Evergreen from a promising regional company into a national contender almost overnight. With Catherine Lynn's backing, we secured municipal contracts in 3 major West Coast cities, each implementation serving as a showcase for our water filtration technology. Suddenly, I wasn't just running the business I'd built from my garage. I was leading a rapidly expanding enterprise with real-world impact that stretched far beyond Portland. The Sacramento implementation is exceeding efficiency projections. By 17%, Rachel reported during our quarterly review meeting. Their utility department is already asking about expanding to additional districts. Diane nodded appreciatively. And the Portland pilot has generated inquiries from 5 other municipalities. We're going to need a dedicated government relations team if this momentum continues. I studied the growth projections on my tablet, a mixture of pride and apprehension washing over me. The numbers represented validation of everything I'd fought to protect from Michael's attempted theft, but they also signaled a fundamental shift in Evergreen's scale and complexity. We were approaching an inflection point that would require significant organizational changes and force me to evolve as a leader. We need to restructure, I acknowledged, setting down my tablet. Our current management approach won't scale with this growth trajectory. The executive team exchanged glances, likely relieved I'd recognized the elephant in the room. Evergreen had operated as an extension of my vision since inception, with decision-making centralized around my direct involvement. That model had worked when we were smaller, but it had become a bottleneck to expansion. I've been thinking about this, Diane ventured. What if we organized around core functions with greater autonomy? Research and development, implementation, client services, each with dedicated leadership reporting to you? And you need a COO, added our CFO, Marcus Tanner, a recent hire from a larger environmental services firm. Someone to manage daily operations while you focus on strategic direction and external relationships. Their suggestions made practical sense, but represented another layer of separation between me and the company that had been my primary focus for so long. Relinquishing direct control of daily decisions felt both necessary and unsettling, like sending a child to college, essential for growth but emotionally complex. You're right, I admitted after a thoughtful pause. Both suggestions. We'll implement a functional organizational structure and begin searching for a COO immediately. I turned to Diane, my longest-standing ally. Would you consider the operations role? There's no one I trust more with Evergreen's future. Surprise flashed across her face, followed by something more complicated. Hesitation mixed with ambition. I'm honored, she began carefully, but I'm not sure I'm the right fit. My strengths are in partnership development and external relations, not operational management. Her self-awareness impressed me. The Diane from our early startup days might have accepted out of loyalty, potentially struggling in a misaligned role. This more mature assessment reflected her own professional evolution. Fair point, I acknowledged. Then let's leverage those strengths properly. What about creating a Chief Partnerships Officer role focused on expanding our implementation network? Her expression brightened. That I could excel at. The meeting continued with productive discussion about restructuring options, each decision reinforcing the company's transition from founder-centered startup to maturing enterprise. By session's end, we had outlined a new organizational chart, with key positions to fill and internal candidates to develop. As the team filed out, Marcus lingered behind. Jennifer, there's something else we should discuss, he began, his tone shifting to something more personal. This growth has implications for your own financial planning as well. I raised an eyebrow. How so? You've never taken significant liquidity from Evergreen, he pointed out. Almost everything has been reinvested in the company's growth. That made sense in the early stages, but with our current valuation, he slid a document across the table, a financial analysis showing Evergreen's estimated market value based on recent comparables and our growth projections. The number at the bottom caused me to blink several times, certain I'd misread. That can't be right, I said, tapping the valuation figure. We're not worth 9 figures. We are according to 3 independent analysts, Marcus confirmed. The municipal water sector is experiencing unprecedented investment, and we've positioned ourselves at the intersection of sustainability and infrastructure renewal. That creates a valuation premium. I stared at the document, trying to process its implications. The business I'd started with personal savings and a second mortgage was now theoretically worth more than I could have imagined. On paper, at least, I had become wealthy beyond my practical comprehension. This changes your personal risk profile, Marcus continued. You should consider diversifying through a partial liquidity event. Nothing that compromises your controlling interest, but enough to secure your family's future independently of Evergreen's performance. His suggestion made logical sense. Until now, my financial fate had been entirely tied to the company's success. A personal liquidity event, selling a minority stake or creating a secondary offering, would provide financial security regardless of Evergreen's future challenges. I'll think about it, I promised, folding the analysis into my portfolio. It's a lot to process. Driving home later, the financial revelation continued reverberating through my thoughts. The valuation represented more than personal wealth. It validated the vision Michael had dismissively called a hobby and the countless sacrifices made to nurture Evergreen through its vulnerable early years. The empire I'd built while he pursued his affair had become exponentially more valuable than either of us had anticipated. Sophia was setting the dinner table when I arrived home, her calculus textbook propped open beside plates and silverware, multitasking as usual. "Productive day?" she asked, noting my distracted expression. "Enlightening," I replied, setting down my briefcase. "Where's your brother?" "Debate team practice. Coach is prepping them for nationals." She closed her textbook, giving me her full attention. "You look like someone who just found out something big." My daughter's perceptiveness never ceased to amaze me. "That obvious, huh?" "Mom, I can practically see the wheels turning behind your eyes." She pulled out a chair. "Sit. Talk." I complied, somehow unsurprised to find myself sharing significant business developments with my 15-year-old. "Evergreen is worth a lot more than I realized," I explained, simplifying the financial complexities. "It's good news, but it means making decisions about the company's structure and my own role that I hadn't anticipated facing so soon." Sophia considered this with the serious expression she reserved for important matters. "Like what kinds of decisions?" "Whether to bring in executives to manage areas I've always handled personally. Whether to take some money out to diversify our family's financial security." I smiled ruefully. "Grown-up problems, I know. Not kid problems, but not bad problems either," she observed pragmatically. "Isn't this what you wanted when you started Evergreen? For it to be successful enough to have these kinds of challenges?" Her perspective cut through my apprehension with teenage directness. She was right, of course. These were precisely the challenges I'd aspired to face when working late nights in our garage during Evergreen's infancy. Evidence of success rather than failure. "When did you get so wise?" I asked, genuinely curious about her insightful response. She shrugged with practiced teenage nonchalance that couldn't quite mask her pleased expression. "Probably around the time everything fell apart with Dad. Nothing like family drama to accelerate personal growth." The casual reference to Michael's betrayal no longer carried the emotional charge it once had. Over the months since the confrontation at Harborview Restaurant, we'd developed a new vocabulary for discussing those events, neither minimizing their impact nor allowing them to dominate our present. "Speaking of your father," I began carefully, "he called earlier about changing this weekend's schedule. He has a work conference and was hoping you and Tyler could visit next weekend instead." I watched for her reaction, still vigilant for signs of emotional distress despite the healing progress we'd made through therapy. Sophia merely rolled her eyes. Classic Dad, changing plans last minute. She sighed with the world-weary attitude that only teenagers can truly perfect. "Whatever. Works better for me anyway." "Emma's having a birthday sleepover Saturday." Her easy adaptation to schedule changes represented significant emotional growth from the fragile, angry girl who had initially struggled with Michael's diminished reliability. Dr. Rivera had helped. Both children develop coping strategies for disappointment while establishing appropriate expectations for their father's limitations, neither excusing his behavior nor defining themselves by his shortcomings. "Does Tyler know?" she asked, returning to homework preparations. "Not yet. I'll tell him when he gets home." Sophia nodded absently, already refocused on calculus problems. The domestic normalcy of the moment struck me suddenly. How we'd reconstructed ordinary life from extraordinary disruption, finding new patterns that accommodated our changed reality without being defined by trauma. Later that evening, after discussing weekend adjustments with Tyler, who received the news with similar equanimity, I retreated to my home office to review Marcus's financial analysis more thoroughly. The numbers remained startling upon second examination, but my initial shock had given way to methodical consideration of options. A knock on the doorframe interrupted my contemplation. Tyler stood in the doorway, his debate team binder tucked under one arm. "Got a minute?" he asked. "I could use your feedback on something." "Always," I replied, closing my laptop. "What's up?" He settled into the chair across from my desk, opening his binder to reveal meticulous research notes. "We're preparing counterarguments for nationals, and I'm working on economic incentives for environmental innovation. His eyes met mine. Basically what Evergreen does, but from a policy perspective. Pride warmed me as he outlined his debate. Strategy: connecting municipal infrastructure investment to long-term economic benefits with sophisticated reasoning, unusual for a 17-year-old. His argument incorporated concepts I recognized from dinner table conversations and overheard work calls, evidence he'd been absorbing Evergreen's business model while I thought he was focused on typical teenage concerns. "That's remarkably comprehensive," I commented when he finished. "Your understanding of the economic incentives is spot on." He looked pleased but not satisfied. "The weakest part is quantifying return on investment for municipal implementations. I have the theoretical arguments but need specific examples." "I can help with that," I offered, recognizing an opportunity to support his intellectual development while respecting appropriate boundaries. "We have case studies from the Sacramento project that demonstrate cost recovery timelines." "Really?" His expression brightened. "That would be perfect." "I'll pull the public data tomorrow," I promised. "Nothing proprietary, but enough to strengthen your position." He nodded, clearly energized by this practical resource. "Thanks, Mom." As he gathered his materials, another question formed. "Tyler, did you choose this debate topic because of Evergreen?" He paused, considering. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because I think it's important. Clean water infrastructure doesn't get enough attention unless there's a crisis, but it affects everything: public health, economic development, environmental protection." His earnest passion reminded me powerfully of my own motivations for founding Evergreen, the belief that practical innovation could address fundamental human needs while creating sustainable business models. Somewhere amid the chaos of Michael's betrayal and our family's reconfiguration, my son had internalized the values that drove my professional mission. "You know," I began carefully, "if you're genuinely interested in this field, we could discuss internship possibilities at Evergreen next summer, or with one of our municipal partners, if you'd prefer more policy-focused experience." His expression shifted from surprise to consideration. "You wouldn't mind me working at your company?" "Mind? I'd be honored," I replied truthfully. "But only if it aligns with your interests, not because you feel any obligation." "I'd like that," he said after a thoughtful pause. "Maybe rotating through different departments to see where I might fit best." The conversation continued, evolving naturally into broader discussion of his college applications and career aspirations. Unlike earlier talks that had centered on following Michael's financial sector path, Tyler now articulated more diverse possibilities: environmental engineering, public policy, sustainable business models. His horizons had expanded beyond emulating his father's narrower definition of success. After he left, I returned to Marcus's financial analysis with renewed perspective. The valuation represented more than personal wealth or business validation. It embodied potential legacy, not just financial security for my children, but meaningful work aligned with values they were independently embracing. This realization informed my approach to Evergreen's restructuring and my own role within it. Over the following weeks, I worked with the executive team to implement our new organizational design, recruiting experienced leaders for key positions while promoting internal talent where appropriate. The transition wasn't seamless. Some long-time employees struggled with reduced access to direct decision-making, while others thrived with clearer accountability and expanded authority. Throughout this evolution, I focused on institutionalizing the values and vision that had guided Evergreen from inception. If the company was to grow beyond my personal capacity to manage every aspect, its cultural foundation needed to be robust enough to sustain that expansion without dilution. "Culture isn't just what we say we believe," I reminded the leadership team during a strategic planning retreat. "It's what we consistently demonstrate through decisions, especially difficult ones. Our municipal water focus isn't merely a market strategy. It's an expression of our belief that sustainable innovation should benefit communities most in need of infrastructure improvement." This clarity of purpose attracted talent aligned with our mission. The most significant addition was Dr. Layla Patel, a renowned hydrologist who left a prestigious academic position to join Evergreen as Chief Technology Officer. Her arrival accelerated our innovation pipeline while enhancing our credibility with scientific and regulatory communities. Your integration of environmental sustainability with practical implementation is unique, she explained during her orientation. Most companies emphasize one at the expense of the other. That balanced approach is what convinced me to leave academia. Dr. Patel's perspective validated the instincts I'd followed while building Evergreen's product strategy, often against Michael's more conventional profit-centered advice. His financial training had emphasized maximizing short-term returns, while my approach prioritized sustainable impact alongside commercial viability, a balance that now differentiated us in an increasingly competitive market. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very business philosophy Michael had criticized as idealistic was precisely what had created Evergreen's significant valuation and attracted partners like Catherine Lin and experts like Dr. Patel. His attempted theft had targeted the products of my innovation without understanding the values and vision that generated them, the true source of Evergreen's worth. This understanding informed my decision regarding personal financial diversification. After thorough consultation with independent advisors, I opted for a structured approach that balanced current liquidity with long-term growth potential. Rather than selling a significant equity stake, I created a personal liquidity plan through targeted distributions that maintained my controlling interest while establishing financial security, independent of Evergreen's future performance. This approach aligns your personal financial stability with Evergreen's continued success, my financial advisor confirmed. You're reducing concentration risk without compromising your leadership position or the company's strategic direction. The resulting financial security created space for considerations beyond immediate survival needs. For the first time since discovering Michael's betrayal, I could contemplate long-term plans without constraint, including personal aspirations beyond Evergreen's growth. "What do you want for yourself?" Dr. Rivera asked during one of our individual therapy sessions, now scheduled monthly rather than weekly, as my healing progressed. "Not for the company or the children, but for Jennifer specifically?" The question caught me off guard. I'd become so accustomed to defining myself through responsibilities to others, mother to Tyler and Sophia, leader to Evergreen's employees, provider for our household, that my personal desires remained largely unexplored. "I'm not sure," I admitted after a lengthy pause. "I haven't thought about it in those terms for a long time." "Perhaps it's time to start," she suggested. "The crisis phase has passed. Your children are thriving, your company is secure, and you've established financial independence. Those achievements create space for personal rediscovery." Her observation resonated with uncomfortable accuracy. I had defined recovery primarily through restoring what Michael's betrayal had threatened: family, stability, business continuity, financial security. Having largely accomplished those objectives, I faced the more nuanced challenge of defining what came next for me as an individual. This question lingered as I navigated Evergreen's continued expansion and my evolving relationship with Michael. Our interactions had settled into a restrained civility centered around co-parenting responsibilities, with occasional awkward encounters at school events or during custody transitions. The white-hot anger that had initially fueled my strategic response to his betrayal had cooled, replaced by something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a diminished emotional investment in his choices and their meaning for my self-worth. This emotional distance was tested when Michael announced his engagement to Amanda during a routine co-parenting conversation. The news shouldn't have surprised me. They had continued their relationship after our confrontation, eventually moving in together officially once our divorce was finalized. Still, the formal acknowledgement of their commitment triggered unexpected feelings not easily categorized as jealousy or resentment. but rather a complex mixture of closure and lingering disappointment. "Congratulations," I replied after a pause, just long enough to be noticeable. "Have you told the kids?" "Not yet," he admitted, clearly relieved by my measured response. "I wanted to discuss it with you first. We're thinking about a small ceremony in the summer, nothing elaborate." "I appreciate the consideration," I acknowledged, recognizing the gesture of respect inherent in consulting me before discussing wedding plans with our children. "Tyler and Sophia should hear it from you directly, preferably in person." He nodded, hesitating before adding, "I've been thinking about what to say, how to frame it without seeming to disrespect what happened between us." The acknowledgement of our history represented growth on his part. The Michael who had orchestrated his elaborate betrayal would have prioritized his narrative convenience over emotional honesty with our children. "Just be straightforward," I advised. "They've processed a lot over the past year. Honesty about your choices now is the best way to rebuild trust with them." He studied me with newfound respect. "You've handled everything with remarkable grace, Jennifer. I don't know that I could have done the same in your position." The compliment landed, awkwardly between us, neither fully accepted nor rejected. "It wasn't about grace," I clarified. "It was about priorities. The children needed stability more than I needed vengeance." We parted with renewed understanding of the parameters of our post-marriage relationship: civil, focused on shared parenting, responsibilities, but fundamentally altered by the choices that had led to our division. His engagement announcement closed a chapter that had technically ended with our divorce, but emotionally remained partially unresolved until this moment. Driving home, I reflected on how differently this news affected me now compared to the devastating impact it would have had a year earlier. The relationship that had once represented ultimate betrayal had been recontextualized through healing and growth, diminished in its power to define my self-perception or happiness. Tyler and Sophia received Michael's engagement announcement, with measured responses that reflected their individual processing styles. Tyler's reaction was characteristically pragmatic, more concerned with practical implications for custody arrangements than emotional symbolism. Sophia expressed more complicated feelings, her initial anger eventually giving way to cautious acceptance. "It's weird," she confessed during one of our mother-daughter coffee dates that had become a weekend tradition. "Part of me is still mad about how everything happened, but another part just wants him to be happy so he can be a better dad to us." "That's a remarkably mature perspective," I observed, impressed by her emotional intelligence. She stirred her latte thoughtfully. "Dr. Rivera says holding on to anger only hurts me, not him. I'm trying to practice that mindset, even though it's hard sometimes." "For all of us," I agreed, recognizing my own ongoing work to release residuals, resentment that occasionally surfaced during difficult moments. "How are you feeling about it?" she asked, studying me with unsettling perceptiveness. "Really feeling, not just the 'I'm fine' answer?" I considered her question carefully, respecting her emotional maturity while maintaining appropriate parental boundaries. "Mostly at peace," I answered truthfully. "What happened between your father and me is finished. His new relationship is part of his life journey, not mine." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. "That's basically how I want to feel about it eventually." "You'll get there," I assured her. "Processing these feelings isn't linear. Some days are easier than others, but the general trajectory moves toward acceptance." Our conversation shifted to school concerns and summer plans, the engagement, news already receding in emotional significance, a milestone noted rather than a crisis navigated. This normalization represented tremendous progress for both of us, transforming what might have been another traumatic disruption into merely an expected life development. This emotional resilience proved valuable as Evergreen faced its first significant implementation challenge with the Chicago Municipal Project. Unexpected geological conditions complicated our filtration system installation, requiring substantial engineering modifications and threatening both timeline and budget parameters. The bedrock composition isn't what preliminary surveys indicated, Dr. Patel explained during an emergency briefing. We're encountering significantly higher mineral content that affects filtration performance. We need to redesign portions of the intake system. The project manager's expression reflected appropriate concern. That modification will add at least 6 weeks to the timeline and approximately $800,000 to the budget. The contract penalties for delay could be substantial. The situation represented exactly the type of crisis that would have previously required my direct intervention and consumed my complete attention. Now, with our restructured organization, I found myself in a different role, providing strategic guidance rather than tactical direction. What options has the engineering team identified? I asked, maintaining focus on solutions rather than recriminations. Dr. Patel outlined 3 potential approaches, each with different implications for timeline, cost, and system performance. The technical details exceeded my expertise, but the strategic considerations aligned perfectly with my responsibility as CEO. Recommendation? I prompted after the technical briefing concluded. Option 2 provides the optimal balance between performance integrity and implementation timeline, she responded without hesitation. It requires the additional investment, but preserves the system's efficiency metrics that differentiated our bid initially. I nodded, scanning the faces around the conference table. Experienced professionals I'd recruited specifically for their expertise and judgment. Implementation team? The project manager concurred with Dr. Patel's assessment. Option 2 also minimizes contract penalties while maintaining our quality standards. We'll need to negotiate timeline adjustments with the municipal authority, but we have documented geological evidence to support the modification request. Finance? I turned to Marcus. The additional investment falls within our project contingency. Reserves, he confirmed. It's significant but manageable within current cash flow projections. In previous years, I might have spent days personally analyzing each option, questioning every assumption, perhaps even visiting the Chicago site, myself before making a decision. Now I recognized that my team possessed both the expertise and judgment to manage this situation more effectively than I could through direct intervention. Proceed with option 2, I authorized. Keep me informed of municipal negotiations and any significant developments, but you have full authority to implement the necessary modifications without further approval. The relief around the table was subtle but unmistakable. Experienced professionals empowered to address challenges within their domains of expertise, rather than waiting for founder approval at each decision point. This moment represented the organizational maturity we'd been building toward. Evergreen functioning as an enterprise greater than any individual, including me. As the team dispersed to implement the Chicago solution, Diane lingered behind. That was different, she observed, with a knowing smile. The old Jennifer would have booked a flight to Chicago tonight to inspect the site personally. The old Jennifer would have micromanaged the entire modification process, I acknowledged ruefully, probably slowing it down in the process. Growth. Looks good on you, she commented, both personally and as a leader. Her observation captured something essential about the past year's journey. The crisis that could have destroyed everything I valued had instead catalyzed evolution, forcing me to distinguish between control and leadership, between managing details and empowering others, between technical expertise and strategic vision. That evening, reviewing quarterly projections with newfound perspective, I recognized how thoroughly Michael's betrayal had transformed not just my personal circumstances, but my professional approach. The woman who had discovered her husband's affair and attempted intellectual property theft would never have delegated a critical decision like the Chicago modification. She would have insisted on maintaining control at every level, driven by fear of additional betrayal or failure. The leader I had become understood that true strength lay in building systems that didn't depend exclusively on my direct involvement, in creating an organization resilient enough to navigate challenges while maintaining fidelity to core values and vision. This wasn't abdication of responsibility, but its more mature expression. Leadership that multiplied impact through others rather than limiting it to personal capacity. This realization extended beyond professional contexts to personal relationships as well. The same evolution that enabled me to trust Evergreen's leadership team with critical decisions allowed me to respect Tyler's and Sophia's increasing autonomy as they matured. Rather than attempting to shield them from every difficult emotion or challenging situation, I focused on equipping them with tools to navigate complexity themselves, just as I'd done with my executive team. Dr. Rivera had described this approach as empowered healing during our sessions, creating conditions for growth rather than trying to manage every aspect of the recovery process. The wisdom of this methodology became increasingly evident as both my children and company demonstrated resilience I couldn't have manufactured through control alone. This philosophy informed my response when Tyler was rejected from his first choice, college, despite exceptional qualifications and compelling essays. Rather than intervening with admissions officers or questioning the decision's fairness, I created space for him to process his disappointment while considering alternatives. "It feels personal," he admitted, uncharacteristically vulnerable in his frustration. "Like everything I worked for didn't matter." "The rejection isn't a referendum on your worth," I reminded him. "It's one institution's decision based on factors you couldn't control. Your achievements remain valuable regardless of their assessment." He nodded, absorbing this perspective. "I know that logically, but it still hurts." "Of course it does," I acknowledged. "Disappointment always does. The question is what you do with that feeling, whether it becomes defining or informative." His thoughtful expression suggested the distinction resonated. "Informative how?" "Maybe it creates space to consider options you might have overlooked," I suggested, "or reveals priorities you hadn't fully recognized before. Sometimes the path we think we want isn't actually the one that best serves who we're becoming." The wisdom I offered wasn't theoretical, but experiential. Lessons learned through my own unexpected journey from betrayal to rebuilding. The career I thought I wanted had been interrupted by marriage and children, then transformed through Evergreen's creation. The family structure I believed would persist had been shattered by Michael's choices, then reconstituted in a different but ultimately healthier configuration. Each disruption had initially appeared catastrophic, but eventually revealed itself as redirective. Not mere obstacles to overcome, but guideposts toward more authentic alignment between values and choices. This perspective didn't minimize real pain or legitimate grief, but at contextual, Tyler ultimately received acceptance letters from 3 excellent universities, including one with a specialized environmental engineering program partnered with Evergreen on research initiatives. His decision-making process reflected newfound maturity, evaluating options based on academic alignment rather than prestige or family tradition. "Stanford has the better overall reputation," he acknowledged during a family dinner where we discussed his options. "But Oregon Tech's specialized focus on sustainable infrastructure might better prepare me for the work I actually want to do. Plus," Sophia added practically, "the scholarship package is more substantial, which means less student debt." I listened to their thoughtful analysis with quiet pride. My children had developed financial literacy and values-based decision-making that transcended the materialistic success metrics Michael had emphasized during our marriage. "What matters most is finding the right fit for your goals," I offered. "Rankings and prestige are external validations that may not align with what will actually fulfill you." Tyler nodded, considering. "I think I'm leaning toward Oregon Tech. The smaller department means more direct mentorship opportunities, and their partnership with Evergreen could open doors for practical experience." His reference to Evergreen's research partnership highlighted an unexpected development in our company's evolution. What had begun as a product-focused enterprise had expanded to include knowledge generation and academic collaboration, an aspect of our growth I found particularly meaningful. The research partnership had emerged from an industry conference where Dr. Patel presented Evergreen's filtration innovations. Her former academic colleagues had recognized commercial applications for theoretical models they'd been developing, creating natural synergy for collaborative research. Universities have the theoretical expertise but lack real-world implementation data, Dr. Patel had explained when proposing the partnership. We have practical applications but could benefit from deeper scientific modeling. The combination could accelerate innovation significantly. The resulting collaboration became a competitive advantage unique to Evergreen's approach, differentiating us from both purely academic institutions and commercially focused competitors who lacked research partnerships. More importantly, it institutionalized knowledge development that would survive beyond any individual contributor, including me. This sustainability of innovation paralleled my evolving perspective on personal legacy. As Tyler navigated college decisions, and Sophia entered her junior year of high school with growing clarity about her own interests in environmental policy, I recognized that my most enduring contribution might not be Evergreen itself, but the values it embodied and transmitted to my children, to our employees, to the communities we served. This perspective informed my response when Catherine Lynn approached me with an unexpected proposition during our quarterly partnership review. The Green Path Board is considering acquisitions to strengthen our municipal infrastructure division, she explained, sliding a folder across the conference table. Evergreen tops our strategic target list. I opened the folder to find acquisition, parameters that reflected Evergreen's significant market position, an offer price substantially above Marcus's already impressive valuation, retention packages for key executives, including generous equity in the combined entity, and operational autonomy within GreenPath's larger corporate structure. I'm flattered, I responded carefully, but Evergreen isn't currently positioned for acquisition. Catherine nodded, unsurprised. I anticipated that response, but the opportunity merited presentation. The offer remains open if circumstances change. Her gracious acceptance reflected the mutual respect that characterized our partnership. Rather than pressing or employing negotiation tactics, she acknowledged my position while leaving possibilities open for future consideration. After she departed, I remained in the conference room, studying the acquisition materials with complicated emotions. The offer represented extraordinary financial validation, a purchase price that would create generational wealth for my family while ensuring Evergreen's innovations would benefit from GreenPath's global distribution channels. Yet something fundamental resisted the proposition, beyond mere founder attachment or control issues. Evergreen represented more than commercial success or personal achievement. It embodied values and vision that might be compromised within a larger corporate structure regardless of promised autonomy. I brought the acquisition materials to our next executive team meeting, placing transparency above personal inclination. Catherine Lynn presented this offer yesterday, I explained, distributing copies to the leadership team. I've indicated, Evergreen isn't currently seeking acquisition, but I wanted everyone aware of the opportunity and interested in your perspectives. The team's reactions varied predictably. Marcus analyzed financial implications, noting the premium valuation and potential synergies. Diane raised concerns about cultural preservation within a larger entity. Dr. Patel questioned how research partnerships might be affected by corporate ownership changes. Their thoughtful assessment helped crystallize my own thinking. This isn't a decision I would make unilaterally, I assured them after lengthy discussion. If circumstances suggest acquisition becomes advantageous for Evergreen's mission, we'll evaluate options collaboratively. This approach represented significant evolution in my leadership style. The founder, who had made unilateral decisions based on personal vision, had developed into a CEO who recognized the value of diverse perspectives in strategic assessment. the painful lessons from Michael's betrayal about control, trust, and the limitations of individual judgment had transformed not just my personal relationships, but my professional methodology. This transformation continued manifesting in unexpected ways, including my response when a competitor attempted to recruit Dr. Patel with an impressive compensation package and expanded research budget. Rather than reacting defensively or immediately, countering with financial incentives, I invited her to discuss her professional aspirations openly. "I appreciate your transparency in sharing this opportunity," I told her during a private conversation in my office. "Beyond compensation, what aspects of the position appeal to you?" Her expression reflected surprise at the question's focus. "The dedicated research division would provide resources for experimental approaches that might not have immediate commercial applications," she acknowledged, "and the academic publication support would maintain my scientific credibility." I nodded, genuinely interested in her professional development rather than merely retaining her services. "Those are legitimate considerations for someone with your expertise and reputation. But I value Evergreen's implementation focus," she continued. "Theory without application has limited impact. The balance here between innovation and practical deployment aligns with my personal mission." Rather than leveraging this sentiment to secure her continued employment, I focused on addressing the legitimate professional needs she'd identified. "What if we established a formal research division within Evergreen? Not just our current application-focused development, but dedicated resources for exploratory innovation with appropriate academic partnership?" Her expression shifted from polite resignation to genuine interest. "That would address my primary consideration, but the budget requirements would be substantial." "Present me with a proposal," I invited. "If it advances Evergreen's long-term innovation capacity while supporting your professional development, we'll find appropriate resources." The conversation ended without immediate resolution. She would consider both opportunities and make her decision based on professional alignment rather than loyalty pressure. This approach represented trust in both her judgment and Evergreen's inherent value proposition, moving beyond traditional retention tactics to authentic engagement with talented contributors' legitimate aspirations. Dr. Patel ultimately declined the competitor's offer, instead developing a comprehensive proposal for Evergreen's advanced research division that became a cornerstone of our innovation strategy. The division formalized our academic partnerships while creating space for exploratory research beyond immediate commercial applications, expanding our innovation pipeline while enhancing our reputation within scientific communities. This organizational evolution paralleled personal developments as Michael and Amanda's wedding approached, creating another milestone in our family's ongoing adjustment to reconfigured relationships. Though I wouldn't attend the ceremony, my children would participate, Tyler as reluctant groomsman, Sophia as even more ambivalent bridesmaid. Their mixed feelings emerged during family dinner conversations, revealing lingering emotional complexity beneath surface acceptance. "Dad wants the perfect blended family picture," Sophia observed with characteristic directness. "Like we've all just moved on and everything's fine now." "Are you uncomfortable participating?" I asked carefully, maintaining neutral expression to avoid influencing her response. She considered the question seriously. "Not uncomfortable exactly, just, I don't want to pretend this is all normal and great. It still feels weird that he's marrying someone who helped him lie to us." Tyler, typically more reserved about emotional matters, surprised me by adding, "I told Dad I'd stand up with him because it's important to him, but I'm not going to fake being thrilled about it." Their honest assessment reflected healthy boundary development, agreeing to participate out of respect for their relationship with Michael while maintaining appropriate emotional authenticity. Dr. Rivera had described this balance as engaged detachment, remaining connected without compromising personal truth or ethical clarity. "That seems like a reasonable approach," I affirmed. "You can support your father's new chapter without pretending the path here was acceptable." Sophia studied me with characteristic perceptiveness. Are you really okay with this? With them? Getting married after everything? The question deserved honest response, calibrated for parental appropriateness while respecting her emotional intelligence. Their marriage represents closure on a difficult chapter, I answered truthfully. Michael deserves the opportunity to build a more honest relationship than the one we had at the end. Whether that's possible with the same person who participated. In his deception is their challenge to navigate, not mine. My genuine indifference to Michael's marriage surprised even me, evidence of emotional healing that had transformed betrayal's acute pain into distant memory. The relationship that had once defined my daily existence had become biographical history rather than active influence on my present happiness or future possibilities. This emotional liberation created space for unexpected developments in my personal life, including a coffee meeting with James Whitaker, the architect redesigning Evergreen's headquarters to accommodate our expansion. What began as a professional discussion about sustainable building materials evolved into wide-ranging conversation about environmental design philosophy, community revitalization, and personal narratives. Sorry, he apologized after sharing his journey from corporate architecture to sustainability-focused design. I'm monopolizing the conversation. Not at all, I assured him. It's fascinating how your professional evolution parallels Evergreen's development, moving from conventional approaches to sustainability-centered innovation. His smile revealed subtle laugh lines that complemented thoughtful eyes. And yours too, from what I've gathered. Founding Evergreen represented significant redirection from your original legal career, didn't it? The conversation continued well beyond our scheduled time, transitioning from professional topics to personal interests and values. His thoughtful questions suggested genuine curiosity rather than polite professional engagement, while his occasional self-deprecating humor revealed refreshing authenticity. As we finally prepared to leave, he hesitated briefly before asking, "Would you be interested in continuing this conversation over dinner sometime? Strictly personal rather than professional." The invitation caught me by surprise, not because it was unwelcome, but because I hadn't considered dating possibilities since before Michael's betrayal. My life had been so thoroughly occupied with family reconstruction and business leadership that romantic considerations hadn't entered my conscious awareness. "I'd like that," I heard myself respond before overthinking could intervene. Though, full disclosure, I haven't dated in nearly 20 years, so my skills might be rusty. His laugh held genuine warmth. Coincidentally, neither have I since my divorce 10 years ago. We can be awkward together. The dinner that followed several days later continued our comfortable conversation, revealing complementary values and compatible perspectives, alongside respectful differences in approaching creative challenges. James's thoughtful questions and attentive listening created space for authentic exchange rather than performative impression management that often characterizes early dating interactions. "May I ask about your ex-husband?" he ventured carefully. Over dessert. "Only share what you're comfortable discussing, of course." The question would have triggered defensive withdrawal months earlier. Now, with emotional distance established through healing, I could discuss Michael's betrayal as historical fact rather than active wound. The short version involves infidelity with his assistant and attempted theft of my company's intellectual property, I explained with remarkable equanimity. The longer version required several months of therapy to process fully. His expression reflected appropriate concern without uncomfortable pity. That's significantly more complicated than my grew in different directions divorce narrative. It certainly made for an eventful 41st year, I acknowledged with the dark humor that had emerged during recovery. But ultimately catalyzed growth I might not have experienced otherwise. Our conversation continued with similar candor about past relationships, current priorities, and future aspirations, creating foundation for potential connection based on authentic understanding rather than curated presentation. By evening's end, We had established comfortable rapport that acknowledged romantic possibility without pressured expectations. "I've enjoyed this," James said as he walked me to my car. "Would you be open to doing it again?" "I would," I confirmed, surprised by my own readiness for this unexpected development. Though full transparency, my life involves two opinionated teenagers and a demanding leadership role that limits spontaneity. "Transparency appreciated," he replied with a smile. "Mine involves frequent travel for sustainable building consultations and an elderly golden retriever who considers himself entitled to half my bed." The exchange's lighthearted honesty established parameters for potential relationship development, appropriate to our life stages and responsibilities, neither rushing toward premature intensity nor dismissing genuine connection through excessive caution. This unexpected personal development coincided with significant milestone in Evergreen's evolution: completion of our headquarters expansion, designed by James's firm to embody sustainable building principles while accommodating our growing organization. The building's innovative features, renewable energy integration, water reclamation systems, and biophilic design elements, manifested our company values in physical form while creating collaborative spaces that reinforced our evolving culture. The headquarters dedication ceremony represented opportunity to articulate Evergreen's mission to assembled employees, partners, and community representatives. Standing before the gathered audience, I reflected on the journey from garage startup to industry leader, a path marked by challenges overcome and opportunities seized. Evergreen began with a simple question, I told the assembled group. How might we transform water infrastructure from resource depletion to sustainable regeneration? That question has guided our innovation through expanding applications and organizational growth, remaining our North Star as markets and methods evolved. I gestured toward the building behind me, its living walls and solar integration representing physical manifestation of our corporate values. This headquarters embodies our commitment to alignment between stated principles and operational practices. The same filtration technology preserving municipal water resources across the country reclaims rainwater from this roof for internal use. The solar arrays powering our research labs reflect the renewable energy integration we advocate in infrastructure design. The symbolism resonated beyond architectural features to organizational philosophy. Most importantly, this building creates space for collaboration across disciplines and functions, recognizing that our greatest innovations emerge from diverse perspectives focused on shared mission. The solutions we create together will transcend what any individual could develop in isolation. This commitment to collaborative innovation rather than founder-centered control represented my most significant personal evolution as leader. The founder who had once maintained oversight of every operational detail had developed into a CEO who created conditions for distributed leadership and collective creativity, maintaining strategic vision while empowering others to implement through their unique expertise. The dedication ceremony concluded with community reception that highlighted Evergreen's local economic impact and environmental contributions. As I circulated among guests, accepting congratulations and discussing future initiatives, Catherine Lynn approached with thoughtful expression. "Impressive achievement," she observed, gesturing toward the building and assembled community. "You've created something remarkable here, Jennifer." "Thank you," I acknowledged. The headquarters represents significant milestone in Evergreen's development. "I wasn't referring only to the building," she clarified. "You've established organizational culture and leadership model that transcends typical founder-centered enterprises. That's significantly more challenging than constructing physical infrastructure, impressive as this building certainly is." Her observation highlighted evolution that had occurred gradually through intentional leadership development, rather than dramatic restructuring. The transition from founder to CEO had happened incrementally through delegation, mentorship, and systematic empowerment of others, creating organization that would thrive beyond my personal involvement. That transition wasn't initially voluntary. I admitted with rueful smile. Circumstances forced distributed leadership before I might have chosen it. She nodded, understanding the reference to challenges that had necessitated organizational maturity. The catalyst matters less than the outcome. Evergreen has developed sustainable leadership model that complements its operational sustainability focus. Her assessment crystallized something I'd sensed but not fully articulated: the parallel between Evergreen's environmental mission and its organizational development. Just as our water systems created regenerative cycles rather than depletion models, our leadership approach now fostered renewal through distributed authority rather than concentrated control that would eventually exhaust any individual leader. This perspective informed my approach to subsequent opportunity that emerged unexpectedly through Tyler's university connection. His environmental engineering program had established relationship with International Development Organization addressing water infrastructure in under-resourced communities, precisely the application that had inspired Evergreen's founding mission. They're looking for implementation partners with scaled solutions that can be adapted for limited infrastructure environments, Tyler explained during weekend visit home. I mentioned Evergreen's municipal systems, and their director was immediately interested. Would you be willing to meet with them? The inquiry represented potential expansion beyond Evergreen's established market into international development. Opportunity aligned with our mission but requiring significant adaptation of existing business models. Rather than making unilateral assessment, I convened cross-functional team to evaluate feasibility and strategic alignment. The technical modifications are feasible, Dr. Patel confirmed during evaluation meeting. Our modular design architecture allows reconfiguration for lower resource environments without compromising core filtration efficiency. The financial model requires reconceptualization, Marcus added. Traditional ROI metrics won't apply, but alternative funding sources through development partnerships could create sustainable implementation structure. This aligns perfectly with our mission, Diane observed, but requires expertise we don't currently possess in international development contexts and humanitarian partnerships. Their balanced assessment reflected mature organizational decision-making, considering opportunity through multiple perspectives without either impulsive enthusiasm or reflexive risk aversion. The founder-centered organization might have pursued inspiring mission without pragmatic evaluation. The overly cautious corporation might have rejected unfamiliar opportunity despite mission alignment. If we proceed, I summarized after thorough discussion, we'll need to establish dedicated division with appropriate expertise and partnership approach distinct from our commercial operations. Thoughts on leadership for this initiative? The question represented further evolution in my leadership approach, recognizing opportunity to develop others through strategic initiative rather than automatically assuming direct oversight of significant new direction. The founder-centered leader would have retained personal control of meaningful expansion. The mature CEO created leadership development opportunity through thoughtful delegation. Rachel Carter has relevant background, Diane suggested, referencing my executive assistant's previous experience with international nonprofits. She's expressed interest in greater responsibility, and her project management skills are exceptional. The recommendation surprised me, as I hadn't considered Rachel for leadership role despite her demonstrated capabilities. My hesitation reflected lingering blind spot, viewing long-term executive assistant primarily through support role rather than recognizing leadership potential demonstrated through increasingly complex project management. Excellent suggestion, I acknowledged, mentally noting this oversight for further reflection. Let's discuss development plan that would prepare her for this responsibility while assembling appropriate team. The international initiative took shape through collaborative planning rather than top-down direction, with Rachel's increasing involvement reflecting growth opportunity for promising talent. This approach reinforced Evergreen's evolving culture, creating leadership pathways beyond conventional hierarchies while ensuring strategic initiatives received appropriate expertise regardless of organizational position. This organizational maturity paralleled family developments as Tyler and Sophia navigated their own growth milestones. Tyler's first semester at Oregon Tech yielded both academic success and expanded perspective. His occasional calls home reflecting emerging adult identity distinct from either parent's influence. "We're studying filtration models that remind me of Evergreen's early designs," he shared during one such conversation. "But I'm seeing limitations I never noticed before." "What kind of limitations?" I asked, genuinely interested in his developing expertise. The regeneration cycles work beautifully in controlled environments, but struggle with irregular precipitation patterns. Climate change is creating exactly those irregularities in many regions. His observation reflected technical insight alongside meaningful personal development, the capacity to constructively critique even admired systems rather than accepting established approaches without question. This intellectual independence represented healthy maturation beyond both modeling and reaction against parental influence. Sophia's development manifested differently as she entered senior year, focused on environmental policy and social justice, interests that complemented Evergreen's mission while establishing her distinct identity. Her college applications targeted programs that combined these interests, reflecting values-based decision-making similar to Tyler's process, but expressing her unique priorities and strengths. "I'm applying to fields Dad would consider impractical," she acknowledged during college planning discussion. "Environmental justice doesn't exactly scream lucrative career path." "Financial security matters," I acknowledged, "but purpose and impact create different kind of wealth. Your father and I prioritized different values, which led to different choices. And different outcomes," she observed pointedly, her expression suggesting deeper understanding of how values alignment affected long-term fulfillment beyond material success. Her insight reflected maturity beyond typical 17-year-old perspective, the capacity to evaluate competing value systems rather than automatically adopting parental frameworks or reactively rejecting them. This discernment had developed through family challenges that forced earlier confrontation with adult complexities than might otherwise have occurred. My children's evolving independence created space for personal reflection about next chapter in my own development. With Evergreen's leadership structure maturing and family reconfiguration stabilizing, questions about future direction emerged with increasing frequency. What would leadership look like once both children were in college? How might my role at Evergreen evolve as organizational maturity reduced necessity for founder-centered authority? What personal aspirations remained unexplored amid responsibilities to others? These questions surfaced during conversation with James, whose increasing presence in my life created context for authentic reflection without pressure for dramatic change. Our relationship had developed gradually over months, establishing comfortable connection characterized by mutual respect and genuine curiosity rather than romantic intensity or domestic integration. "You've mentioned potential board roles with environmental organizations," he noted during weekend hike in Forest Park. "Is that direction you're considering more seriously?" The question invited reflection without presumption, creating space to articulate emerging possibilities. "I'm exploring how my experience might contribute beyond Evergreen specifically," I acknowledged. "The company has developed sustainable leadership model that doesn't require my daily operational involvement, which creates options I hadn't previously considered." "Like what?" he asked, genuine interest evident in his expression. "Policy advocacy addressing infrastructure investment at federal level. Advisory roles with environmental startups needing mentorship through growth stages. Perhaps writing about sustainable business models that balance profit with environmental impact. All building on what you've created while extending into new applications," he observed thoughtfully. "Similar to Evergreen's technical evolution from residential to municipal systems." His insight highlighted pattern I hadn't fully recognized. the transfer of established expertise into expanded contexts rather than fundamental redirection. Just as Evergreen had maintained core filtration technology while adapting implementation, for diverse applications, my leadership approach could apply across varying contexts while maintaining consistent values and methodologies. This conversation continued intermittently over subsequent weeks, creating framework for intentional planning, rather than reactive response to circumstances. Unlike earlier life transitions triggered by external events, marriage, motherhood, Michael's betrayal, this evolution emerged from internally directed reflection about purposeful next chapter. The deliberate nature of this planning process represented significant personal growth from reactive patterns that had characterized earlier life stages. The young lawyer who had subordinated career aspirations to support Michael's professional advancement had evolved into mature leader intentionally designing future aligned with personal values and professional strengths. This evolution manifested practically through systematic leadership transition at Evergreen, creating gradually increasing autonomy for executive team while shifting my focus towards strategic initiatives and external relationships. Rather than abrupt departure or continued hands-on management, this approach established sustainable transition, honoring both founder contribution and organizational development beyond individual leadership. The executive team is ready for expanded authority, I explained during board presentation outlining transition plan. My role will gradually shift towards strategic guidance and external representation rather than daily operational oversight. This evolution ensures continuity while creating space for next-generation leadership development. The board's response reflected confidence in both transition approach and organizational readiness, approving structured implementation timeline with appropriate milestones and accountability measures. Unlike traumatic transitions triggered by founder departure or external disruption, this planned evolution honored institutional knowledge while embracing leadership renewal. This professional transition paralleled personal developments as James and I discussed potential relationship evolution with characteristic thoughtfulness. Rather than rushing toward conventional milestones like cohabitation or marriage, we considered authentic relationship model appropriate to our life stages and existing commitments. I'm not interested in recreating traditional domestic partnership, I acknowledged during weekend getaway to Oregon coast. My independence matters after years of compromising personal identity within marriage. Completely understood, he replied, without defensiveness. I value my autonomy too, after adapting to solitary routines that work for my life. Perhaps we design relationship that honors both independence and connection rather than following prescribed model. His willingness to consider unconventional approach reflected shared values around authenticity and intentional choice rather than automatic adoption of social expectations. The relationship that emerged from these discussions maintained separate residences while establishing meaningful integration through regular time together, shared experiences, and mutual support for individual goals alongside collective activities. This thoughtfully constructed connection represented perfect metaphor for broader life philosophy that had emerged through challenging journey. Intentional design based on authentic values rather than external expectations or reactive patterns. The same principles that guided Evergreen's sustainable water systems, regenerative cycles, balanced resource exchange, adaptability within core integrity, now informed personal and professional choices across contexts. The anniversary dinner, that had revealed Michael's betrayal and Amanda's participation, had initially appeared catastrophic. The destruction of family structure and potential devastation of business I'd built. Yet the systematic response to that crisis had catalyzed transformation more valuable than what had been threatened. Organizational maturity beyond founder dependence, family relationships based on authentic connection rather than obligatory, roles, and personal identity grounded in intrinsic worth rather than external validation. This perspective crystallized during Evergreen's 5th annual Sustainability Summit, where industry leaders gathered to discuss environmental innovation and implementation challenges. Standing at podium to deliver opening remarks, I surveyed assembled audience representing journey from isolated startup to industry influence, partners, competitors, policy advocates, and academic collaborators united by shared commitment to environmental impact through practical innovation. Sustainable systems require both resilience and adaptability, I began, the principle applying equally to organizational development and personal growth. The capacity to maintain core integrity while evolving in response to changing conditions. The balance between preservation and transformation that characterizes truly regenerative models. The audience's engaged attention reflected recognition of truth that transcended technical application to broader philosophy. Evergreen's journey embodies this balance, maintaining founding mission while evolving implementation approaches as context changed. Our organizational development parallels our technical innovation, creating regenerative leadership model that renews itself through distributed authority rather than depleting resources through centralized control. This observation represented both professional philosophy and personal testimony, the integration of leadership principles with lived experience that gave abstract concepts practical credibility. The woman delivering these remarks had been forged through challenge that could have destroyed what she valued most, emerging with deeper understanding of both resilience and regeneration than theoretical knowledge alone could provide. The most sustainable resource isn't found in technical innovation alone, I concluded, but in human capacity for purposeful adaptation. The recognition that challenges which appear destructive often create possibility for regeneration stronger than what existed before. The understanding that intentional response to disruption determines whether change becomes devastating or transformative. The substantial applause that followed suggested resonance beyond polite professional acknowledgement, recognition of truth that applied across contexts from organizational development to personal resilience. The principles that had guided Evergreen's evolution from garage startup to industry leader had paralleled my own journey from betrayed spouse to empowered individual, creating integrated philosophy, authentically embodied rather than artificially adopted. As Summit continued with technical presentations and implementation case studies, I found myself reflecting on distance traveled from that devastating anniversary dinner, not just chronologically, but developmentally. The woman whose husband and his mistress had demanded half of her business, Empire had responded not with helpless victimization, but with strategic reclamation of what truly mattered, ultimately creating something more valuable than what had been threatened. The empire I'd built while Michael pursued his affair had never been contained in technical patents or corporate valuation, though those certainly represented meaningful achievement. Its true substance existed in values manifested through action, in relationships based on authentic contribution rather than exploitation, in purpose-driven innovation that transcended profit motivation without ignoring financial sustainability. That empire continued expanding not through defensive protection but through generous transmission, to children developing their own purpose-aligned paths, to employees growing through leadership opportunities, to communities benefiting from sustainable infrastructure, to industry influenced by demonstrated alternatives to extractive business models. This perspective transformed the anniversary dinner confrontation from devastating ending to catalytic beginning, not minimizing genuine pain experienced, but recognizing transformative possibility within apparent destruction. The mistress who demanded half had inadvertently created conditions for doubling what truly mattered, though neither she nor Michael could have anticipated this outcome from their calculated betrayal. Such transformation rarely follows linear progression, moving instead through cycles of disruption, reclamation, and regeneration that mirror natural systems. The sustainable business empire built amid personal betrayal embodied this cyclical renewal, maintaining core integrity while evolving through challenge into more resilient manifestation of founding vision. This integrated understanding represented the most valuable outcome of difficult journey, not just surviving betrayal or protecting business assets, but developing philosophy that transcended specific circumstances to inform authentic life design across contexts. The empire built would continue evolving through intentional adaptation, rather than remaining static achievement to be merely defended against threat. And in that continued evolution lay the ultimate victory over betrayal's intended diminishment. The transformation of apparent ending into expansive beginning, limited only by courage to envision possibility beyond conventional boundaries. The business empire built while husband cheated had become vehicle for ongoing growth, rather than defining achievement. Its value measured in regenerative impact rather than mere accumulation of resources or power. That regenerative impact continued, unfolding through cycles of challenge and response, extending influence beyond original vision through collaborative innovation rather than controlling authority. The journey that began with betrayal's painful revelation continued through intentional transformation, creating legacy more valuable than what had initially appeared threatened by anniversary dinner's devastating demand. The letter arrived on embossed stationery, formal invitation to event I never expected to attend. Evergreen Innovations induction into Oregon's Business Hall of Fame. 20 years after starting with nothing but determination and a water filtration prototype in my garage, the company had grown beyond even my ambitious vision. 500 employees across 3 continents, innovative systems providing clean water to communities from Portland to Nairobi, and sustainability standards that had reshaped an entire industry. I traced the raised lettering with my fingertip, remembering the woman who had once believed her husband's dismissive assessment. A nice hobby, Jennifer, but let's be realistic about its potential. That woman seemed distant now, almost unrecognizable in her eager acceptance of artificial limitations and borrowed beliefs about her own capabilities. "Are you going to RSVP or just stare at it all day?" Sophia teased, leaning against my home office doorway. At 25, my daughter had blossomed into a formidable environmental policy advocate, her law degree and natural eloquence making her a rising voice in legislative circles. She'd inherited my determination and analytical mind while developing her own distinctive approach to creating change. "Just reflecting," I admitted, setting down the invitation. "Sometimes the distance between then and now seems impossibly vast." She settled into the chair across from my desk, her expression softening. "Thinking about how it all started?" "About everything that's happened since," I clarified, "including parts I never planned." Her knowing smile acknowledged the understatement. None of us had planned the seismic disruption of Michael's betrayal, or the subsequent reinvention it had necessitated. Yet looking back, those painful events had ultimately catalyzed greater authenticity and purpose than the comfortable illusion they'd shattered. "Will you invite James to the ceremony?" she asked, referencing my partner of 5 years. Our relationship had evolved into something neither of us had initially envisioned. Not the traditional marriage I'd known with Michael, but something more intentionally designed to honor both connection and independence. "Of course," I replied, "along with you and Tyler, if his research schedule allows." My son had followed his environmental engineering degree with doctoral studies focused on water infrastructure resilience in climate-stressed regions. His research now informed Evergreen's international division, the same division Rachel Carter had built from concept into thriving operation, proving Diane's instinct about her leadership potential had been prescient. "Tyler's already booked his flight," Sophia revealed. "Said not even his dissertation committee could keep him from watching his mom get the recognition she deserves." The matter-of-fact support from my children still occasionally caught me by surprise, their unquestioning confidence in my capabilities, contrasting sharply with Michael's subtle undermining that had once seemed like practical guidance rather than limitation. "Speaking of recognition," I began, changing the subject, "I heard about your testimony before the state legislature last week. The video is making quite an impression online." Sophia's impassioned argument for strengthening environmental protection standards had indeed gone viral, her articulate dismantling of industry objections capturing attention beyond policy circles. While she brushed off the attention with characteristic humility, Her growing influence demonstrated impact beyond anything I could have orchestrated through direct intervention in her path. Just applying what I've learned from watching you. All these years, she demurred. Speaking truth to power while offering practical solutions. Her assessment highlighted the unintentional legacy that had emerged through lived example rather than deliberate instruction. Values demonstrated through consistent action during both triumph and adversity. The most meaningful inheritance I'd provided my children wasn't financial security or professional connections, but witnessing resilient response to challenges that might have broken someone with less developed core identity. This perspective informed my approach to the acceptance speech now taking shape in notes scattered across my desk. Beyond acknowledging Evergreen's commercial success, I wanted to articulate the philosophy that had guided its evolution. Principles. Discovered through experience, rather than adopted from business theory. Any advice for my remarks? I asked Sophia, respecting her communication expertise. Tell the real story, she suggested without hesitation. Not just the sanitized success narrative, but the messy, complicated journey that got you here. That's what people actually connect with. Her insight reflected wisdom beyond her years, understanding that authentic vulnerability creates more meaningful impact than polished perfection. The Hall of Fame induction represented opportunity to share hard-earned perspective rather than merely accepting accolades for commercial achievement. This approach characterized the speech I ultimately delivered before assembled business leaders, government officials, and Evergreen team members. Standing at the podium in the historic downtown hotel ballroom, I surveyed faces representing different chapters of a journey, more circuitous than anyone could have anticipated. Conventional business narratives focus on strategic brilliance and visionary leadership, I began, setting aside prepared remarks for more authentic communication. The mythology of the founder who perfectly anticipated market evolution and flawlessly executed expansion plans. My experience suggests a different reality, one where unexpected disruption often catalyzes more meaningful growth than careful planning alone could generate. The audience's attention sharpened, recognizing departure from standard acceptance platitudes toward something more substantive. 20 years ago, Evergreen began with straightforward mission, creating residential, water filtration systems that balanced sustainability with practical performance. That mission expanded through opportunities I neither predicted nor initially welcomed, challenges that forced adaptation beyond comfortable limitations. Without mentioning Michael specifically, I acknowledged the personal crisis that had necessitated evolution beyond founder-centered leadership. Circumstances required developing organizational structure not dependent on any individual's direct control, distributed authority that ultimately created more resilient enterprise than centralized management could sustain. From front row, James offered encouraging smile, understanding the diplomatic reference to transformation catalyzed through betrayal's painful disruption. Beside him, Tyler and Sophia exchanged knowing glances, recognizing the understated description of family reconfiguration that had ultimately strengthened, rather than diminished, our collective resilience. The most valuable business lessons emerged, not through strategic planning but through necessity's demands, I continued. Learning to distinguish between controlling outcomes and influencing direction. Recognizing that meaningful legacy exists in values transmitted rather than structures maintained. Understanding that sustainable growth requires cyclical renewal rather than linear progression. These insights reflected integrated philosophy developed through lived experience rather than abstract theory, principles equally applicable to organizational development, family relationships, and personal growth. The business empire built amid personal betrayal had become vehicle for discovering universal truths rather than merely accumulating commercial success. Evergreen's sustained impact stems not from brilliant original vision, but from willingness to evolve that vision through changing circumstances, I acknowledged. From research partnerships that expanded our innovation capacity beyond internal resources. from leadership development that created opportunities for talent like Rachel Carter to pioneer international initiatives beyond my personal expertise. Rachel's surprised expression at this public acknowledgement reflected her characteristic humility, the same quality that had initially masked leadership potential behind executive assistant role. Her subsequent development of Evergreen's international division had transformed communities across 3 continents while establishing her reputation as humanitarian infrastructure pioneer. The sustainable business worthy of recognition isn't measured through valuation metrics alone, I concluded, but through regenerative impact that continues beyond founder involvement, through organizational culture that develops leadership at every level, through innovation that addresses genuine human needs rather than manufacturing artificial demand. This philosophy represented Evergreen's true distinction, not merely commercial success, but integrated approach to business purpose that transcended profit motivation without ignoring financial sustainability. The company had demonstrated viable alternative to extractive models that dominated traditional industry, proving regenerative practices could create competitive advantage rather than charitable compromise. The standing ovation that followed reflected recognition beyond polite acknowledgement, response to authentic perspective rarely articulated in conventional business contexts. As audience members approached afterward with thoughtful questions and personal reflections, the conversation expanded beyond Evergreen specifically to broader implications for sustainable business philosophy. Your perspective on distributed leadership resonates with challenges we're facing, acknowledged Catherine Lin, whose partnership had facilitated Evergreen's initial expansion beyond regional markets. The transition from founder-centered authority to sustainable organizational structure represents our current growing pain. The most challenging aspect isn't structural but psychological, I observed, sharing insight from personal experience. Recognizing that meaningful influence doesn't require controlling every operational decision, that strategic vision can manifest through others' implementation without diminishing its integrity. This understanding had developed through necessity rather than theoretical exploration, forced evolution when personal crisis eliminated capacity for micromanagement. The betrayal that might have destroyed everything valuable had instead catalyzed organizational maturity beyond what planned transition could have achieved. Later that evening, celebrating with family and close colleagues at intimate dinner gathering, the conversation continued exploring connections between professional achievement and personal development. James raised glass in thoughtful toast that captured this integration. To building something that reflects your values while creating space for others to contribute their unique gifts. His understanding highlighted why our relationship had flourished while maintaining unconventional structure. Unlike Michael's superficial support masking underlying control agenda, James genuinely celebrated achievements that didn't center his involvement, recognizing that meaningful connections supported independent development rather than constraining individual potential. I've been thinking about what comes next, I shared with the intimate gathering. Not retirement exactly, but evolution beyond daily operational leadership. Creating space for next generation to assume greater authority while focusing my energy on areas where experience offers unique contribution. This transition had been developing gradually over recent years, with executive team assuming increasing operational responsibility, while I focused on strategic initiatives and external relationships. Unlike abrupt departure or continued hands-on management, this evolutionary approach honored both founder contribution and organizational development beyond individual leadership. The mentorship program with environmental startups, Tyler suggested, referencing initiative I'd been exploring with industry partners. Among other possibilities, I confirmed, including that sustainable housing development James and I have been discussing, integrating Evergreen's water systems with his architectural approach to create demonstration community. The project represented potential evolution beyond Evergreen, specifically, applying established expertise to new context while continuing mission-aligned impact. This approach characterized thoughtful transition rather than retirement or reinvention, building on accumulated wisdom while exploring fresh applications. As conversation continued exploring potential directions, I found myself reflecting on distance traveled from devastating anniversary dinner, where Michael and Amanda had demanded half of everything I'd built. What had initially appeared catastrophic, disruption had ultimately catalyzed more meaningful expansion than comfortable stability could have generated. The business empire threatened by their betrayal had not merely survived but thrived through trauma-induced transformation, evolving beyond vulnerable founder dependence into resilient enterprise with distributed leadership and regenerative impact. The family structure they had carelessly fractured had reconstituted into more authentic connections based on shared values rather than obligatory roles. Most significantly, the woman they had underestimated had discovered capacities beyond what comfortable circumstances might have revealed, developing integrated philosophy that transcended specific business application to inform authentic life. Design across contexts. The empire built while husband cheated had ultimately created foundation for ongoing evolution rather than static achievement requiring defensive protection. This perspective transformed the anniversary dinner confrontation from devastating ending to catalytic beginning, not minimizing genuine pain experienced, but recognizing transformative possibility within apparent destruction. The mistress who demanded half had inadvertently created conditions for doubling what truly mattered, though neither she nor Michael could have anticipated this outcome from their calculated betrayal. Such transformation rarely follows linear progression, moving, instead, through cycles of disruption, reclamation, and regeneration that mirror natural systems. The sustainable business empire built amid personal betrayal embodied this cyclical renewal, maintaining core integrity while evolving through challenge into more resilient manifestation of founding vision. This understanding represented the most valuable outcome of difficult journey, not just surviving betrayal or protecting business assets, but developing philosophy that informed authentic life design through intentional choice rather than reactive response or external expectation. The empire built would continue evolving through purposeful adaptation, its value measured through regenerative impact rather than mere accumulation. As evening concluded with warm embraces and plans for future gatherings, I recognized the quiet contentment that had gradually replaced anxious achievement orientation once driving my efforts. The woman who had once defined success through external validation had evolved into someone who recognized intrinsic worth independent of others. Assessment: maintaining ambitious standards while releasing attachment to specific outcomes. This internal transformation represented the most meaningful aspect of journey catalyzed through betrayal's painful revelation. Not just rebuilding external circumstances, but discovering authentic identity beyond roles and relationships that had previously defined self-perception. The business empire built while husband cheated had ultimately facilitated personal reclamation more valuable than commercial success alone. Standing on hotel balcony overlooking Portland's twinkling cityscape, James joined me in comfortable silence that reflected relationship built on mutual respect rather than performative interaction. "Proud of you," he offered simply, understanding significance beyond evening's formal recognition. "I'm proud of what we've all built," I corrected, acknowledging collective achievement rather than individual accomplishment. "Evergreen as it exists today represents contributions beyond anything I could have created alone." This perspective reflected fundamental truth discovered through challenging journey. The most sustainable achievements transcend individual effort to create regenerative impact, maintained through distributed contribution rather than centralized control. The empire built amid betrayal had ultimately demonstrated this principle through organizational evolution that paralleled personal transformation. In that alignment between professional philosophy and personal experience lay the integrated wisdom that represented true legacy beyond specific commercial achievement. Understanding that continued to inform intentional choices across contexts while creating foundation for ongoing evolution, limited only by courage to envision possibility beyond conventional boundaries. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.